Last week, the Secretary of State announced further actions to do so, including measures to prevent tests being booked up and resold by bots, and bringing in the army to bolster examiner numbers. We continue to develop and assess further measures to help tackle this serious issue.
Shadow Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Snuck out on a government website, we learn narrower roads are coming to make driving more miserable. Isn't it the case that such a move will cause even more friction between motorists and cyclists and slow our roads down so much it costs the economy billions?
Mr. Speaker, claims that government guidance mandates a certain road width are false and misrepresent Active Travel England guidance. There have never been legally binding standards for road widths, and that remains the case. It's obviously right that each road should be designed to meet the needs of local use, and that includes on road width. These decisions are for local traffic engineers. If the honourable member is saying that we shouldn't design roads to help avoid fatalities, I would suggest that he's out of step with most people across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's on their own website. But let's turn to another government blunder. Taxpayer-funded schemes to bribe the public into buying something they don't want, that now we learn they'll be financially hammered for doing what the government told them to do in the first place. Isn't it time to just let people choose what they want to drive before electric becomes the new diesel?
If the electric car grant scheme was so unpopular, I don't know why 30,000 people have availed themselves of it since its launch in the summer. I am clear, Mr. Speaker, that the transition to electric vehicles is a key plank of this government's agenda, both because of the good jobs it can create, but also the need to clean up the way we travel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, at a recent church hall meeting in Elmswell, yet another quintessential Suffolk village, a number of my constituents raised concerns about the local railway crossing. This rapidly growing village relies on an outdated level crossing, creating enormous hold-ups, inconvenient at best and dangerous at worst. In Thurston nearby, passengers can only access the platform by walking across the tracks. And although I welcome Mid-Suffolk District Council's recent decision to invest, what action is the government taking to improve safety and reduce disruption at rural railway crossings?
I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I am enjoying the tour of village halls this morning. Level crossings can be a significant source of safety risk. Network Rail, the owner of this level crossing, has legal responsibility to reduce risk as low as practically possible. The Rail Minister would be happy to meet with my honourable friend to discuss the specifics of the crossing.
Honourable Glover, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The new railway between Oxford, Bicester and Milton Keynes has been open for more than a year and successfully running freight and charter trains, but passenger trains have yet to start. When will passenger services begin, and what does the Secretary of State feel are the lessons for her department as to what's gone wrong?
Mr. Speaker, there were significant delays under the previous government, 14 months between their intention to move to procurement in, I think it was March of 2023, and no action on it until the general election actually happened last year. Within a couple of months of me being in post, we appointed Chiltern as the operator. There are discussions that are ongoing locally, and I hope that the services are up and running as soon as possible in the new year.
Laura Kirk-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's great news for train travellers in Aylesbury this week, as the government has announced that contactless pay-as-you-go ticketing will be rolled out from Aylesbury Station from the 14th of December. So will the Minister join me in encouraging Aylesbury residents to give it a try, and can the Minister assure me that they'll get the best value ticket when they do?
I'd be very happy to encourage local people to give it a try, and I'm delighted with the announced expansion of Pay-As-You-Go to 50 additional stations, including Aylesbury Station next month. I can assure the member this offers local residents greater flexibility, convenience and the best price for their journey for on-the-day travel.
Andrew Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. The Secretary of State will know, because I've raised it so many times, about the appalling situation at Gallows Corner, A12, A127 junction. It's affecting everybody on the east side of London, well into Essex and all of my constituents. Total incompetence by TfL and the Mayor of London. So, will the Secretary of State take charge of the situation, overriding the Mayor of London and TfL, ensuring that this infrastructure project is completed no later than the spring of 2026, because it's already been delayed for 6 months already?
I fully appreciate that everyone in the constituency that he represents will want to see progress on this as soon as possible. I would point out that Gallows Corner has been in a state of disrepair for many years, and in fact, under the previous Conservative government, Transport for London received no substantive support, but this Labour government has put over £50 million to finally make the structure safe and reliable again in the spending review. Responsibility now sits with TfL.
Gavin Bailey.
Mr Speaker, the recent approval of Virgin Trains' application to share Leighton's Temple Mills depot with Eurostar is welcome news for jobs and investment in my constituency and for green economic growth. May I ask, what plans does the Secretary of State have to further seize the opportunities from cross-channel rail?
The decision of the ORR was very welcome with respect to unused capacity at Temple Mills. We do need to explore whether there are ways to increase depot capacity further, and he will be aware there are a whole series of further steps that we need to go through until passenger services are live and running. But I am really keen that we make use of the spare capacity that exists in the Channel Tunnel to improve and increase the number of direct international rail services that run from London.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Hundreds of residents scramble to Twyford train station in my constituency every morning to get to work either in London or other nearby towns. The village has become overwhelmed, with many struggling to find somewhere to park. Can the Minister meet with me to update me on plans for improving local travel links to help residents access new services like the Elizabeth line and even a rail link to Heathrow?
I would be very happy to ask the Rail Minister to meet with him to talk about the particular issues around the station that he mentions and to understand what more we could do to properly integrate transport options in that area.
Paul Wall.
Speaker, apologies for jumping the gun earlier. We need to crack down on drug drivers. Rochdale's Leon Clark crashed his car and killed his 8-year-old son while driving under the influence of cocaine. Does the Minister agree we need to change the law on roadside drug tests to stamp out this rising menace on our roads?
My honourable friend is a great campaigner on road safety, and he's right to raise this tragic case and the growing menace of drug driving. I'm proud to tell him that our first drug driving focused Think campaign will be launching this coming Monday, and if my honourable friend or indeed any members across the House would like to know more, they'd be very welcome to come along to the drop-in I'm holding in W3 at 5 p.m. on Monday.
Christine Jardine.
Mr Speaker, the City of Edinburgh Council's consultation on a new tram route has just closed, but there are newspaper reports in the City that officials are now in discussion with government advisers about potential funding options. Can the Minister clarify if this is the case, and if so, ensure that the views expressed in that consultation by my constituents will be adhered to?
I'm happy to talk to my officials about that particular scheme, and if I may, I will come back to her in writing.
Chris Webb.
Yesterday in Parliament, I met a number of bus drivers who told me in their research of 420 routes, 222 didn't have any toilets during the route, with 155 of those had no procedures in place for drivers who needed to access toilets during the route as well. These drivers deserve toilet dignity in their workplace. So will the Minister agree with me that we need to ensure that these providers give them that toilet dignity, but also will she meet with me to discuss this further to ensure they get that access?
I will, of course, be pleased to meet with my honourable friend. I think welfare facilities for drivers is extremely important.
Thank
you, Mr Speaker. Many of my residents rely on Transport for London services to travel every day, yet they are not entitled to concessions that those living literally hundreds of metres away enjoy, which is an issue that I have raised before in this chamber. Can the Minister advise me of any way, besides literally turning up at City Hall, that I could meet with a relevant person to discuss this?
I'm interested that the honourable gentleman's constituents want to avail themselves of concessions provided by the Labour Mayor of London. He will know that Londoners often pay a precept to fund some of the entitlements that they have in London, and that is the reason why his constituents who fall outside of the Greater London boundary do not have those concessions available to them.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bracknell Forest Council, supported by Department for Transport funding, have delivered an early Christmas present for residents with free bus journeys for the first 3 weekends in December. So will my honourable friend share my joy in this scheme, boosting our local economy, and I know it's only November, but wish everyone in Bracknell Forest a very Merry Christmas.
It would be my pleasure to wish them a very Merry Christmas, and I'm very pleased to hear about this. We've confirmed £1 billion of funding for buses to support and improve services in 25-26 to keep fares affordable.
Katie Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cross-Channel Rail was already mentioned this morning, but specifically trains from Ashford to Paris were a massive boost for my constituents in the Wirral of Kent and are much missed. It's fantastic news that Virgin would like to run trains again from Ashford and also from Ebbsfleet, but I know there's some open questions about how the stations would be updated. It would be great to hear about any conversations the Right Honourable Lady might have had with Virgin about what might need to happen next to move this forward.
As I said to my honourable friend in answer to a previous question, there are a whole number of steps now that need to be gone through subsequent to the ORR decision that we welcomed. We're very keen to see the stations both at Ashford and Ebbsfleet reopened, and I'll be talking to all operators who are interested in making that a reality.
Ewan Stenback.
Speaker, considering the imminent publication of the 10-year bus pipeline and rapidly rising Chinese market share in UK bus orders, can the Minister expand on what the Government will do to ensure domestic manufacturers receive the level playing field that the SNP's infamous ScotZ2 shopping list for Chinese manufacturers dismally failed to deliver?
I thank my old friend for his question. As he's aware, we've been working very closely with operators and manufacturers as part of our bus manufacturers expert panel. We'll be publishing that pipeline of orders in the near future.
Tom Turgander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister will know that there's no mandate for TfL beyond the bounds of London, little enough within it. Would she agree with me that it has absolutely no mandate to increase the price on rail fares to Tunbridge by extending the peak hour system in London on areas where there is now talk of putting contactless? Can she assure me that rail fares to Tunbridge and to Borough Green will not be going up should contactless increase?
The expansion of the contactless system to wider areas of the South East is, I'm sure, welcomed by his constituents, given the convenience that it gives them. He's shaking his head, but I can tell him that there are a lot of honourable members across this House who are delighted with the rollout of pay-as-you-go. If he wants to write to me with the detail of his concern, I'd be happy to come back to him.
Alan Anderson.
Speaker, East West Rail promises to be hugely transformative for Bletchley, positioning the town as a key economic hub, not only between London and Birmingham, but also Oxford and Cambridge. But with a new eastern entrance at Bletchley Station, we can unlock the jobs and investment that will not only revitalise the town centre, but also deliver a modern gateway to visitors at Bletchley Park. So we've got local backing, we just need some local funding. So will the Secretary of State meet with me and key strategic partners to discuss how we can realise that opportunity?
I'd be very happy to help ask the Rail Minister to meet with my honourable friend. I do think East West Rail could be transformative for his constituency. Indeed, I saw a recent Instagram post that he did explaining some of the improvements at Bletchley. That probably says more about what I'm viewing on Instagram than anything else. But I have full confidence in the ability of this railway to transform the travel experience for his constituents.
Max Wilkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Spring Bridge in my constituency was designed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. The previous County Council administration put off vital work to fix the bridge after a landslip. What can the government do to help the current Liberal Democrat administration speed up work to get the work completed? And will the government encourage the County Council to open one lane as soon as possible for the benefit of businesses and residents who are being put off by diversions?
He may wish to suggest to his council that they consider the Structures Fund and the process for securing money from the Structures Fund when we make that announcement in the new year, as it is designed to help resolve the sorts of situations that he describes in his own constituency.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a growing body of evidence about the dangers caused by headlight glare. The department, I know, is doing its own research on this. Could the Minister give an indication of when new regulations might be brought forward to reduce the risks?
Well, I thank him for this important question. He'll know that last year we commissioned groundbreaking independent research to better understand the problems of headlight glare. We're looking at that and considering how we might take this forward, although, as I'm sure he knows, that these are subject to international vehicle regulations.
OK, that completes questions. Come to the urgent question. I'm once again reminding ministers on the requirement in the government's own ministerial code that major announcements should be made in the House in the first instance and not to the media. This applies to Secretary of States. It is disappointing that the Secretary of State for Defence gave a speech on television yesterday and no statement from the government has been made in this House. And I hate to say, the House went up at 3 o'clock yesterday. There was a huge gap of time that could have been taken. This is the third in a row from the Defence where it's been put to the outside, to the media, rather than here. We are elected members of Parliament. All ministers serve this House, not Sky News or the BBC. So I do hope the message is going back. The ministerial code is not fit for purpose if this continues to happen. So I hope it's going to be used and make sure that ministers take it seriously. So please, as I stated yesterday, matters relating to defence of the realm should always come to this House first. I now call James Cartledge to ask his urgent question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Defence if he will make a statement on the use of lasers by the Russian spy ship Yantar.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to make a statement on the Russian main directorate of deep sea research.
To the Minister gently. Unfortunately, it's not a statement. That's what I was wished. We are answering an urgent question. And I think that is the big problem, that somehow different departments have decided that statements don't matter. I know it's not the gentleman in question, but I hope the message is going to go back to the Defence Secretary and that people are listening how important this House comes first. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I will pass the message into the broader team. I'd like to make some comments on the Russian main directorate of the Deep Sea Research Programme known as GUGI. As the Secretary of State for Defence described yesterday, the Russian research vessel Yantar is part of this programme and is used for gathering intelligence and mapping undersea infrastructure, not just in the United Kingdom, but across many other nations, both in Europe and indeed across the globe. The UK understands that the Yantar is but one in a fleet of Russian vessels designed to threaten our critical national underwater infrastructure and pose a threat, indeed, to our economics and our way of life. Russia has been developing a military capability to use against critical underwater infrastructure for decades. GUGI is developing capabilities. It's deployed from specialist surface vessels and submarines that are intended to be used to survey underwater infrastructure during peacetime, but then damage or destroy infrastructure in deep water during a conflict. Russia seeks to conduct this type of operation covertly without being held responsible. Such capabilities can be deployed from surface vessels like the Yantar. That's why Defence directed a change in the Royal Navy's posture so that we can better track and respond to the threats from this vessel and many others. The Yantar has once again been operating in and around the UK's EEZ for the second time this year. During this time, she was continuously monitored by Royal Navy frigate HMS Somerset and the RAF's P8s. We will ensure that the Yantar is not able to conduct its mission unchallenged or untracked. But this has not been without difficulties. A laser assessed to be originating from the port side of the Yantar was directed at British personnel operating one of our P8s. This was a highly dangerous and reckless attempt to disrupt our monitoring. The P8 continued to monitor the Yantar's activity. Personnel, when they arrived back safe in the UK, were medically assessed post-incident, and no injuries were sustained. There was no damage was sustained to the aircraft or her equipment. Russia does not want us to know what they are doing. They do not want us to know what the Yantar is up to. It does not want the world to know what it is doing, but we will not be deterred. We will not let the Yantar go unchallenged as it attempts to survey our infrastructure, and we will work with our allies to ensure that Russia knows that any attempt to disrupt or damage underwater infrastructure will be met with the firmest of responses. And I'd like to finalise by saying a great thank you to the brave men and women of our Royal Navy and RAF that continue to keep us safe at home and abroad.
James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question. And I do echo what you said. It is unacceptable that we are getting the Minister's update on a major national security incident 24 hours after the Secretary of State gave his press conference. Have ministers learned nothing from the total shambles of the SDR when defence companies got a copy many hours before parliamentarians? But turning to the incident itself, this appears to represent a serious escalation by Russian forces in close proximity to our homeland. And given the priority of protecting our service personnel, and I welcome the news about the P8 pilots being unharmed, can the Minister outline what mitigations are being taken against the evolving laser threat involved? But surely what this incident really underlines, Mr. Speaker, is that Russia remains a serious threat. That being so, we couldn't help but notice that the Defence Secretary got the podium out for the media yesterday, just as the Defence Select Committee was publishing a damning report about Labour's total lack of progress on boosting our defence readiness. The report said that when it comes to readiness, the government are moving, and I quote, at a glacial pace. And on the subject of pace, the SDR promised a defence readiness bill which would include measures to deal with the grey zone threat, Mr. Speaker. But ministers recently told me it hasn't even been timetabled. So what year will the Defence Readiness Bill become law? Now, capability questions are going to be key when it comes to undersea cables. But every one of Labour's defence policy papers has been late. They promised to publish a defence investment plan, and I quote, in the autumn. With a week of that season remaining, will they keep that promise? Finally, Mr. Speaker, as the Minister himself knows better than anyone, when it comes to the hybrid threat, our special forces remain more important than ever. So is he not concerned that General Sir Michael Rose, who led the relief of the Iranian embassy siege that made the SAS world famous, has condemned the government for, and I quote, hounding SAS veterans, warning this will harm recruitment and morale? To conclude, the Yantar incident shows the seriousness of the threat we face, but in response, what are the government actually doing? The answer: Labour are cutting £2.6 billion from defence spending this year, surrendering sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, and following their shameful vote this week, they're putting the British Army back in the dock.
Who said nonsense? Minister.
The honourable member is correct. Russia does remain a threat. With a conflict ongoing in Ukraine causing over 1,000 casualties a day, it is the biggest threat the UK has faced in a generation. It's worth noting, though, as we progress, from my perspective, the criticism to the government about not doing anything. You're trying to, collectively, the opposite side is trying to convince us that from 24 years of service and watching the degradation of defence, watching the lowest morale in armed forces, watching houses with families with leaky homes and damp, being equipped with equipment that isn't fit for purpose, watching ships go alongside that haven't left docks in years, looking at a decrepit and delay and downwriting of all of our defence capabilities, what we had to put up for. And now, in the first time in a generation, the military is looking to an increase in defence spending. It's looking with the Strategic Defence Review, integrated missile defence, NATO first. By 2027, we'll run out steadfast December to look at a whole-of-society approach. 4 billion into uncrewed systems, 1.5 billion into munitions. The Defence Readiness Bill is another legislative process to push further changes through by the end of this Parliament. And then we talk about elements of the tip of our spear, recruitment and retention. I can assure you today, looking into the details, there isn't a recruitment and retention in the tip of the spear. Indeed, the recruitment and retention issues that we inherited created the smallest army since Napoleonic times. And that was the government on the other side of this bench. So before we start lecturing us a year and a half into government on how decrepit our defence is and downplaying our soldiers, Air Force and those individuals in the Navy, you should take some responsibility for the mismanagement of the defence portfolio for the last 14 years.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Yantar's presence within our waters makes clear Russia's threat to our democracy, and I'm grateful for the service of the brave men and women of the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force for protecting us. Set within the context of the Defence Select Committee's recent report, can the Minister highlight how our government's leadership of the Ukrainian Defence Contact Group, treaties with Germany and France, are essential in ensuring that we reset our relationships and ensure democracy is safe within Europe?
I'd like to thank the honourable member for his contribution. Since coming into government, we've signed the Trinity House deal with the Germans, we've renewed the Lancaster House deal with the French, we've done a world biggest ever frigate deal with the Norwegians, bringing in 10 billion of investment, the Typhoon deal with the Turkish, UK-EU security and defence. We've led the coalition of the willing with the French. We've taken on the UDCG, which has generated billions of pounds investment for Ukraine. EU, US, India deal. I would argue that this is like an episode, a really bad episode of deal or indeed no deal.
Liberal Democrats, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I begin by joining the Minister in thanking our service personnel for their bravery and dedication. The use of lasers in this incident was a brazen act of aggression by Russia which endangered the lives of RAF pilots. So has the government identified those Russian officials and military personnel who gave the order to engage so that they can be held accountable and sanctioned? What assurances can the Minister give that Russia understands the consequences of repeating this aggression towards the UK? Mr. Speaker, this episode has shown once again the lengths to which Putin will go to undermine Britain's defence. It follows the reports of Russian sabotage of Poland's civilian railway this week. So can the Minister tell the House what conversations ministers have had with fellow European ministers to agree a collective response to Russia's hybrid attacks, including to protect Europe's critical undersea infrastructure? And Mr. Speaker, recognising also that our Ukrainian allies are on the front line of Putin's aggression, will the Minister take forward my bill for the unilateral seizure of Russian assets in the UK so that these can be used to fund Ukraine's defence? Minister.
The honourable member brings up a really valid point that the Yantar and the Gugi programme isn't just a UK issue. Neither is the asymmetric threats that we collectively face across Europe. It's an international issue. In particular, on Gugi, these vessels operate all over the world. And we will collectively work together to gather evidence, in particular, show them that we know exactly what they're up to, and if indeed expose any nefarious activity. And I would like to make the message to be in absolutely no doubt, we will hold people, states, organisations accountable should any of our critical national infrastructure be threatened in any way.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given both the previous Baltic Sea incident in 2024, where underground cables were said to be sabotaged, and the latest provocation, where the Yantar is said to be mapping underground undersea cables, could the Minister please outline how Allied coordination, particularly with our Nordic and Baltic partners, could be strengthened?
Minister.
The honourable member raises a really valid point. We've seen several cables in the Baltics be severed or cut. I would argue that the Yantar and its intelligence gathering capability maps these cables, and then perhaps accidents take place at a later date. We're working really well with our Norwegian, in particular, partners and the US to ensure that we understand the exact capabilities, and I mean the exact capabilities that sit on some of these vessels. So if it were to happen, we can attribute it and indeed expose it, not just from a UK, but from an allied perspective.
Responding to that directly, if the government is trying to map the capabilities of the vessels, can it tell us whether it knew in advance that it had this laser capability, and if it did, whether steps are underway to find methods of protecting our personnel against the effect of such laser attacks? And can he and the government just be careful not to fall for the bully's playbook of the killer in the Kremlin? It's no coincidence that this incident happened now, just at a time that the Americans are coming up with a peace plan, inverted commas, that plays into the hands of Putin and betrays our Ukrainian friends.
Minister.
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Member for his contribution, as always very focused and meaningful. The Honourable Gentleman, apologies. The specific capabilities, I won't go into detail. From our perspective, there's been no impact on the aircraft, no impact on the crew, and we've also expanded and broadened out our rules of engagement to ensure that no vessel can operate oversea over our critical national infrastructure without being watched and monitored in the most closest and sophisticated way.
Sarah Coombs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first duty of any government is to keep our citizens safe, which is why this Labour government is delivering a historic uplift in defence spending, in stark contrast to the cuts of the party opposite. The Minister's statement sets out a potent example of the rising threats to our country. So can he say more about how our increased defence spending is going to keep us safe and also support jobs in the defence industry, such as the Wesley Group in my constituency, which makes all the castings for our UK submarine fleet?
Minister.
The Honourable Member raises a really important point, that defence spending isn't just about defending the nation, it's about an engine for growth. The Typhoon deal alone has created over 20,000 jobs, and as you'll have seen recently, we're providing up to 100,000 drones to Ukraine just recently as well. And that's not necessarily to do with just the capability going forward, but the industrial base back here in the UK. Huge amounts of increase in defence spending in 2027 will broaden out our defence industrial base. Combine that with deals both here and in the UK will make this an engine for growth, increase jobs, prosperity, but importantly, shore up the defence of the nation.
Sir Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I, on the one hand, congratulate the government for being more forward in its public responses to this kind of provocation than any other European member of NATO, let alone the United States? But can I also just point out that this underlines what we know from what Putin and Lavrov have been saying. They think they are at war with NATO and war with the United Kingdom already. And the question is not how we retaliate directly, but how we retaliate in order to put pressure on Putin and Russia, and that is by increasing our military assistance to Ukraine, to tip the balance in the favour of Ukraine, to change the calculus, to get the Russians to come to the peace table and to agree a proper ceasefire, which even President Trump's appeasing plan seems most unlikely to achieve.
Minister.
The Honourable Member is right. We must push as hard as we can to impose cost on Russia. To date, we spent $21.8 billion in Ukraine, $4.5 billion in military support, and I know we have support from both sides of the House to do everything we can to increase that pressure. I mentioned previously we've upped our drone production to 100,000 drones this year, and we're increasing our training of Ukrainian troops up to 61,000 in total. We will do whatever it takes to enable the Ukrainians to win the peace.
Total crime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Yantar was intercepted in the North Atlantic, which is the UK's new front line, but for my constituents it is their backyard. And we're very assured by the preparedness of the RAF and the Royal Navy, and grateful for that in defending our airspace and sea space. But what kind of assurance can the Minister give to my constituents about preparedness and resilience to meet these kind of hybrid attacks? Because these cables don't just run across the Atlantic, they run between our islands too.
Minister.
Honourable Member highlights a really valid point. The northwest of Scotland plays an invaluable part in our defence architecture, but also sustaining economic growth with a variety of different undersea infrastructure. We have some of the best ships, the best personnel, the best aircraft, and the best members in the Air Force that are going to continue to monitor, track and deter any Russian aggression anywhere near our territorial waters and within our EEZ.
Mr Speaker, firstly can I associate myself with the comments about the bravery and the professionalism of the military personnel involved in the response to the Yantar's presence, many of whom are based in my own constituency with Lossiemouth. Yesterday the Defence Select Committee published a report which recommended that the UK Government needs to accelerate and deepen defence relationships with the EU in the face of Russian threats. But the EU are unsurprisingly now charging the UK to enter agreements that we had EU member access to prior to Brexit, and this leaves these isles more isolated. So in the face of this very real Russian threat, what is the risk to RAF pilots and crews from Lossiemouth, and can you tell me the specifics of any plans to work closer with European allies to ensure safety and security of our North Sea and to ensure the protection of Scotland's coast from Russian vessels?
I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. We're working really closely with our European allies to get both access to the START programme, but also EU and UK partnership when it comes to defence. And that's primarily for two reasons. One is so we end up with a far more collaborative and interoperable defence capability, but secondly, to ensure that the economic benefits of both are seen south of our coast and also here in the United Kingdom. Really important from a P8 perspective is we have a trajectory to invest in P8s long into the future. They play such an important role in our anti-submarine warfare fleet and will continue to do so until the threat has gone.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his statement and also join him in thanking the Royal Navy and RAF personnel and other civilian staff that have been involved. I wonder if he could comment on our air defence, as there is a possibility that vessels like the Yantar could be used to launch drone attacks on the UK. Can the Minister reassure us that he's working to bolster the UK's air defence systems?
Minister.
It's a very, very valid point. For years, we have not taken homeland security seriously. In the SDR, you will note we've invested in integrated missile defence, which is both important for very sophisticated systems, but also those low-grade systems that we've seen flying in our airspace that are sometimes more difficult to track and defeat. So you absolutely have the assurance we're investing in integrated missile defence as we move forward with the Strategic Defence Review and the Defence Investment Plan.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome many of the comments that my honourable friend has made today. I would just add enormous thanks to the intelligence personnel who assisted in not only zeroing in on the ship but understanding its capabilities a long time before anybody else arrived on the scene. May I just raise with him, as a fellow former military assistant in the MOD, we've both seen governments of every colour making decisions and statements that sound good on the day, but then seeing the reality of lack of kit coming through. I saw it under Blair and Brown. I saw it again, yes, under governments of my own stripe. He's also seen it, I'm sure, under all. I raise this because the reality is the world has changed. We are much, much more vulnerable today than we have been, and yet we have fewer ships at sea, fewer men at uniform, and fewer planes in the air than we have at any time. And yet the aspiration for the 3% is still, by the end of the Parliament, over the next 5 years, and always on the never, never. He must be very careful, and I'm sure he's hugely aware, that he's there to change defence, not to apologise for failure.
Minister.
The honourable and gallant member raises a really valid point. When we came into government, we have taken a really significant step to raise defence spending. But he knows, as well as many other in the House today, that it's not just about buying or investing in the same capability, it's about rebuilding and reshaping our armed forces to fight not yesterday's war, but the war in the future, and absorbing many of the lessons from Ukraine to ensure we can transform our military to fight in the most effective manner. And that's why, personally, I got into this game in the first place, was to move that faster, in particular when it comes to autonomous systems. So you'll see in the Strategic Defence Review a massive increase of $4 billion into autonomous systems. You'll see the numbers of drone companies. Just today, the Defence Secretary has opened another factory just down in Plymouth, and I'm away to go after this to open one in Swindon. A huge industrial base is building within the UK for drones. It's a seed corn capability that can expand rapidly at times of conflict. And I'm happy to take any of these points offline to talk further how we can work collaboratively to move forward.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The reckless act from Russia demonstrates how important it is that the world stands united against Putin's aggression. So what discussions has the Minister had with his international partners about maintaining and galvanising this support?
Minister.
A really useful point. Individually we are strong, collectively we are united. And I think it's really, really important that we double down on our allies and partners, whether that be NATO, whether that be the JEF, whether that be some of our European or international allies, to collaborate. And I'd like to refer both to the last couple of questions. This is all about stronger we are together, whether that is stronger in the UK with the Army, Navy, Air Force or intelligence partners to expose the Yantar's capability, or indeed collectively working with all our like-minded allies to make sure we're mapping and tracking their capability. And should there be a disruption in critical national infrastructure, we can expose it and attribute it as fast as possible.
Ben Obsi-Jekti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think everyone in this House should be concerned by the increase in Russian sub-threshold activity, and this certainly isn't the first time that we found ourselves in this House discussing the Yantar specifically. I do think that the use of lasers against an operational P8 very much pushes the boundaries of what we could consider to be sub-threshold activity. But if I could ask the Minister a question that's very much within his bailiwick, I don't expect him to be able to comment on whether we have deployed any elements of the Fleet Contingency Group forward to HMS Somerset, which is tracking the Yantar, but under what circumstances and geographically whereabouts within our waters would the Yantar need to be in order for us to apply some maritime interdiction via the Fleet Contingency Group?
Minister.
So I'd like to thank the honourable gallant member for his point. Being an individual who used to be in that part of the organisation, I'm sure there's lots of people that are chomping at the bit to get involved. We must adhere to the international rules of the sea. But I will be really clear to anyone listening to this today that we know exactly what they're up to. Without a shadow of a doubt, we know what they're up to. And should there be a connection between understanding our cables or undersea infrastructure and disruption, individuals, units, organisations or countries will be held accountable.
Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The sight of this sinister ship snooping around our shores strikes alarm. So how can we be confident of the security of our vital undersea communication cable? And what, without compromising our security, actually is Plan B if these are severed?
So as the honourable member will know, we work with our allies to build contingency across all of our critical national infrastructure. There's lots of work to do, and we're working in collaboration with other governments to do it. I think the point he raises, which is one of the most important, is that Russia wants to operate in this veil of darkness, and sort of in the shadows. But let's just be really clear to them. We know exactly what they are doing. We know everything that they are up to. A laser pen is not going to deter us. We will continue, we will double down, and if required, we will expose and attribute.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Madam Deputy Speaker, now in light of this recent escalation, can I ask the Minister what specific and immediate steps he's taking to ensure that UK armed forces are equipped to both protect critical underwater infrastructure and respond both rapidly and effectively to direct threats from Russia and others?
Minister.
The strategic event review points to the multi-role ship and us actually buying into both mapping and tracking our infrastructure, protecting it, and importantly, if required, to deter capabilities such as the Yantar and other variety of suites of capabilities that the Russians can field to ensure that they can't work with impunity either in the EEZ or indeed in international waters as well.
James Wild.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In January, the Defence Secretary did come to this House and make a statement when the Yantar passed through British waters, but didn't see fit to do so when that ship directed lasers at our pilots, which I think reflects poorly on him. Can I ask the Minister, has the Russian ambassador been summoned over this highly dangerous action? And if not, why not?
So I'd like to thank the member for raising that point, and it's something I'll take up with my FCDO colleagues. We've got to continue to ensure that if there is unruly activity or escalatory activity, that both diplomatically individuals are called in and held to account, and we will continue to do so.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We know, as the Minister has said, that Russia and China target undersea cables and interconnectors, which we rely on increasingly as a matter of government energy policy. We know that the Russians use our offshore infrastructure to put listening devices on to monitor our submarines. We know that China dominates the world market for cellular internet modules and inserts kill switches into the turbines this government wants to buy from them. I've been asking this question for a year now. Why isn't there a single minister in charge of the security of our offshore energy infrastructure? And what representations have ministers in the Ministry of Defence made to the Energy Secretary who's causing so many of these problems?
Minister.
So the individual is right to mention that up until now there has been, I wouldn't say a lack of accountability, but a lack of centralisation when it comes to critical national infrastructure. There was a recent report issued. We now have very clear lines of accountability. Defence is part of that. We're building our capability within the Strategic Defence Review to ensure we fulfil our roles within it, and working collaboratively across government to ensure that our critical national infrastructure is protected. And should there be an incident, there is accountability.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his strong words and his answers. I think they encourage us all in this House and encourage those outside this House who are listening. Let us be quite clear and succinct. Twice now Russian ships have entered British sovereign waters, and to add to this aggression, they have been tracking our RAF pilots with lasers. Our enemy has breached our waters disgracefully and have disregarded neutrality and showed disrespect, and the facts and the evidence are there. So can the Minister confirm that this is a form of an attack? And to quote Winston Churchill, who I loved as a boy, he certainly would have been my hero, we shall defend our island whatever the cost may be, and that the might of our armed forces is poised, the equipment is trained, and they're ready to go. Thank you.
Minister.
I'd like to thank the honourable member, as always, for his insightful question. Be in no doubt we will defend every inch of this country and our territorial waters, and if anything is taking place in our EEZ in particular, we will expose, we will attribute, and be in absolutely no doubt we will hold people, organisations or countries accountable should there be any impact on our critical national infrastructure or there be a disruption. Thank you.
I thank the Minister for his responses this morning. Order, order. I will now announce the result of the deferred division that took place yesterday on the draft radio equipment amendment Northern Ireland Regulations 2025. The ayes were 376, the noes were 16. So the ayes have it. Which brings us to urgent question. Dame Priti Patel.
Deputy Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for the FCDO if she'll make a statement on the future on the war in Ukraine and the forcible removal of children to Russia.
Minister.
Russia's assault on Ukraine is an unprovoked, premeditated and barbaric attack on a sovereign, democratic state. For over 3 years, Ukrainians have defended their country with courage and a fierce determination to defend the shared values that we cherish. President Putin continues to intensify missiles and drone attacks into Ukrainian cities, which continue to kill civilians, including children, and damage vital civilian infrastructure. President Putin is also taking children from their families. Almost 20,000 Ukrainian children have been forcibly deported to Russia or Russian temporarily controlled territory by Russian authorities. We are closely engaged with Ukraine and our international partners to ensure Ukraine gets the support it needs to defend itself and achieve a just and lasting peace. President Putin has shown no readiness to engage in meaningful peace negotiations. At last week's Foreign Ministers meeting, G7 partners were clear that international borders must not be changed by force. We will also continue to use the full might of our sanctions regime to bear down on the revenues that are funding Putin's war and ratchet up pressure to force him to engage in meaningful talks. To date, this government has sanctioned over 900 individuals and entities targeting Russia's illicit shadow fleet and its 2 largest oil producers. We have also announced a ban on maritime LNG, all to curb funding of Russia's war chest. Russia's heinous policy to deport, indoctrinate and militarise Ukrainian children demonstrates the depths to which they will sink to eradicate Ukrainian identity and future. The UK has committed more than £2.8 million to support Ukrainian efforts to facilitate the return and reintegration of children deported by Russia. Since the beginning of September, Ukraine's pilot tracing mechanism, which the UK is co-funding, has already identified over 600 additional children who were deported to the Russian Federation or relocated within the temporarily occupied territories. The Foreign Secretary discussed this issue with Ukrainian Foreign Minister during last week's inaugural meeting of the UK-Ukraine Strategic Dialogue. We're working internationally in support of Ukraine and Canada, who are co-chairing the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children.
Dame Priti Patel.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this House has been resolute in its support for Ukraine and its defence of its territory, sovereignty and freedom. Since 2022, the level of support we've given to Ukraine has been at the forefront of working with them to secure peace on their terms. With US military officials in Ukraine today, we need to know what role the UK government and the coalition of the willing is playing. So can the Minister tell this House what is the government's position on the reports that the United States is brokering a deal with Russia that will involve Ukraine making territorial concessions to Russia, with Russia gaining territory or holding some of a lease arrangement where they effectively control the east of Ukraine? Were the UK involved in drawing up these proposals? The report suggests that the Ukrainian armed forces will be reduced and limited as a result of these proposals. What is the government's view on this? Are these reports accurate, or are there proposals on the table that align more closely with our view and the Ukrainian view that Russia should leave Ukraine? Can the Minister give an update on the steps being taken to pressure Russia and its economy? We know of the sanctions measures and they're being kept under review, but are proactive steps being taken to press countries to stop refining Russian oil? Turkey, India and China all have refineries and are significant importers of Russian oil. When the Prime Minister was meeting the Turkish President last month, did the Prime Minister raise this issue and press them to stop? We've asked this before but did not get a direct yes or no answer. Have British ministers raised this issue with their Chinese counterparts when they're going to discuss with the CPP ministers when it comes to their shuttle diplomacy in Beijing? Is there an update on securing the proceeds from the sale of Chelsea to support Ukraine? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, today is World Children's Day, and our thoughts are with the reported 20,000 Ukrainian children abducted by Putin. We welcome the reports of the returns and the rescue of 1,800 Ukrainian children, but what further steps are being taken by Britain to secure their return as soon as possible? And is this a priority in the talks that are now taking place?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank the Shadow Foreign Secretary for the tone of her question. This whole House is united on these questions, both in support of Ukraine and in outrage at the iniquity of what the Russians are doing in relation to Ukrainian children. We are glad of our partnership with the Ukrainian government in the new tracing mechanism. As I said in my statement, it has made some progress since September in identifying more than 600 children who should be returned to Ukraine, and we will use our full efforts to ensure that that is the case. The Shadow Foreign Secretary asks about some of the reports in recent days. She will, I'm sure, have seen the US Secretary of State's statement this morning, in which he indicates that there are a range of ideas that are being discussed. Of course, the Foreign Secretary is in direct and regular discussions with the US Secretary of State and made an important statement last week at the G7 in relation to these questions. That statement reiterated that an immediate ceasefire is urgently needed. We should be clear. President Zelensky is ready for an immediate ceasefire. The UK supports him in that initiative. It is President Putin who is failing to come to the table. What should be the starting point of negotiations? That was clear in the G7 statement. The current line of contact should be the starting point of negotiations, and we remain committed to the principle that international borders must not be changed by force, and I know that is a principle held with great force across the whole of the House.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today, on International Children's Day, we are reminded that safeguarding the next generation isn't just a value we hold dear, it's a responsibility of every member of this House. More than 100 members of this House over recent days have backed President Zelensky's Bring Kids Back initiative, standing united with Ukraine and its stolen children, and I want to thank every member who has done so. I also want to thank the Minister for working with me on supporting the Ukrainian government's launch of a new pilot programme, Tracing the Children, which since September has found 600 of those children. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, if media reports over the last 24 hours are to be believed, that is the US brokered peace deal, it should trouble every single one of us. Because a deal that trades away Ukrainian territory, that trades away Ukrainian security and makes no mention at all of the 20,000 children that Russia have stolen from Ukraine, is not peace. It is capitulation. And this House should stand united in rejecting that proposed deal. Can the Minister assure this House that before any peace deal is considered, that the future of Ukrainians' 20,000 stolen children will be top of that agenda?
Stop.
I know that the whole House recognises my honourable friend's work on this issue ever since she's arrived in this place and before. It is at the top of our minds, the atrocities that have been conducted against Ukrainian families. The removal of children must be first among them. This remains a priority for this government. I described the tracing mechanism, as did my honourable friend. We are pleased with the results since the pilot began in September. I can confirm that the Foreign Secretary discussed it with the Ukrainian Foreign Minister during his visit last week, and we will continue to work on these issues. It cannot become the norm in international relations to kidnap children and relocate them. That is what we have seen from the Russians, and that is what we oppose, and that is why we will continue to work in the way that we are. I've already provided some response on the questions of negotiations, but to set out the very obvious, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Ukrainian flag flies from the building of the Foreign Office. It flies from many churches in Lincolnshire, as I know it does, across constituencies represented in this House this morning. The UK is steadfast in its support for Ukraine. It will be for Ukraine to determine the negotiations into which it is prepared to enter, and that is what the Foreign Secretary was discussing with the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, the US Secretary of State, and a range of her other international partners last week.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Donald Trump's latest proposals for securing peace in Ukraine might as well have been written in the Kremlin. Indeed, they probably were. Those in Reform UK who have been paid to repeat Russian propaganda may disagree, but I believe those in the House today will see this for what it is. If Kyiv is pressed by Moscow and Washington into accepting these terms, which include the surrender of the Donbass and a halt on vital weapons supplies, it would be no less than a betrayal of our Ukrainian allies. Well said. So will the Minister publicly express the government's unequivocal rejection of these proposals, including the sacrifice of Ukrainian sovereign territory? Will the government urgently convene a coalition of the willing with a view to generating fresh support for Ukraine? The abduction of tens of thousands of Ukrainian children by the Kremlin is the clearest and most grotesque evidence of Putin's cruelty and his desire to erase a whole nation. It will go down as one of the gravest crimes of the war. So what further financial support is the government offering to bring back kids? And will the Minister back my bill to seize Russian assets in the UK and make those proceeds available to help Ukraine's children, women and men?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for his question. I won't answer on Reform's approach to these questions. They haven't made themselves available this morning, unlike many others who I know have a deep commitment and interest in these questions. The Liberal Democrat spokesperson asked me about the funding that we have committed to tracing and reunited Ukrainian children. We have provided more than 2.8 million in support of these efforts. He asked about the latest reporting about what a deal might look like. I'll draw his attention to the very most recent statement in which both the US, UK and the G7 were committed, which I read from earlier, which was last week, and indeed the US Secretary of State's statement this morning as well.
Dame Nia Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I congratulate my honourable friend for Paisley in future for her excellent work in respect to the stolen Ukrainian children. And we all want to see them returned as soon as possible. But does the Minister agree with me that it's only through greater resolve, unity and support from the West that will drive back Russia's outrageous demands for Ukrainian territory and pave the way for a peace which represents Ukraine's interests? And what more can he do to encourage greater support for Ukraine from our allies?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think there is resolve in Ukraine amongst its allies, and there is very significant unity. There have been a range of steps in recent weeks, including the sanctions that the Shadow Foreign Secretary referred to, the steps announced over the weekend in relation to Ukrainian children, and of course the strategic dialogue with Ukraine that the Foreign Secretary conducted here in London last week. We will continue to press. There is a illusion, I fear, taking root in Moscow, which is that one more push, yet further military operations, will lead to a weakening of resolve in Ukraine, in the UK and across the West. That is an illusion. We will remain steadfast in support of our Ukrainian friends.
Sir Bernard Jenkin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I just remind the Minister that I'm looking forward to tabling a motion for a backbench business debate on the subject of Ukraine, which will refer to the 20,000 abducted children, and I join with him in congratulating the Honourable Lady for Paisley and Renfrewshire for the work she is doing on this subject. But it will also draw attention to the other atrocities. Just this week we welcomed 2 former Ukrainian prisoners of war who had been held and tortured by the Russians completely without regard to the Geneva Conventions for prisoners of war, because the Russians, of course, fabricate this narrative that they're not at war in Ukraine, they are conducting some special military operation. So they have no regard for any of the norms of warfare which we would expect any civilized country to have. Can he underline the point that the Trump proposals are unacceptable? And will he join all the NATO allies together to make it clear to the United States that these proposals are unacceptable?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I'll ensure that the Minister for Europe is aware of his proposals in relation to further discussions in this House on these very important questions. He is right to draw a line, to draw attention to the clearly preposterous Russian position that they are engaged in an operation rather than a war. I am less well versed in military matters than the Minister for Armed Forces, but this is clearly not an operation. Some years in, thousands upon thousands of casualties of men, women and children in, and a very significant loss to Russian forces even over the last month. He asked about our position in relation to some of the media speculation. He'll understand why I'm reluctant to be drawn in great detail. I can point him to the very clear statement from the G7 last week, and indeed to the latest comments from the US Secretary of State this morning.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The stealing of 20,000 children like this is an outrage. Can I thank the Minister for his statement? Does he agree with me that the Bring Kids Back campaign is right to emphasise the return of these children as non-negotiable in any future peace deal?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. It is non-negotiable. You cannot steal children in 2025. I think that that is an acceptable way to conduct war. The relevant international legal provisions are absolutely clear, and I know that this whole House, and indeed the whole country, is genuinely outraged by what the Russians have done.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Putting forward proposals that could have been drafted by the killer in the Kremlin himself, it seems that President Trump has finally given up on the Nobel Peace Prize and is content to settle for the Lenin Peace Prize instead. Does the government share my concern at the remarks, admittedly aspirational, by the US ambassador to NATO that his long-term hope would be to see Germany take over America's role at the heart of the alliance? Doesn't that betray the decades of peace after the Second World War that NATO was created to preserve?
Minister.
Member Speaker, I'm not familiar with the Lenin Peace Prize. I'll Google it afterwards. I've been clear on the position. I've been clear on the basis of negotiations. Clearly, it is for Ukraine, as a sovereign nation, to determine the position that it takes in negotiations. I did see some of the reports about the discussion. I think it was, to be fair, about who should perform the role of SACEUR rather than what the future division between forces would be in NATO. NATO remains a vital component of European security, perhaps the most signal commitment between Europe and America of our shared defence and shared values, and long may it continue.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Russia is enduring significant financial pressure as a result of their illegal war in Ukraine. Does the Minister share my view we must impose maximum economic pressure on Russia to force Putin to the negotiating table?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do. I feel great sadness for the Russian people, because the truth is President Putin appears to be happy to endure their hardship at almost any cost. The Russians are suffering terribly, both on the battlefield and in their standards of living across Russia. The sensible thing for President Putin to do, the thing that he has refused to do, is enter into the ceasefire talks that President Zelensky, the UK and many of our allies have called him to enter into. This is not complicated, this is not difficult. We will continue to apply financial pressure on the Russians until he does so, and it is with great regret that some of those sanctions will put further pressure on the already suffering Russian people. That is what we must do, that is what we will continue to do until those ceasefire talks begin.
Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister is very well read, and so therefore I wonder if you can identify at any point in history where the appeasement of an aggressive expansionist autocrat has ever worked out well. And can he explain to the population of these isles and the rest of Europe, who've endured those energy prices for the last 3 years, who took Ukrainians into our homes, and who listened to his government and the previous government unite the House, saying whatever it takes and however long it takes, we'll get Ukraine's sovereign territory back. And here we are with the United States apparently in bilateral talks with Russia about how to carve up Ukraine. Does he have any positive message around about what the UK's role is in rejecting that? And if he doesn't have a positive message for me here today, what's the message from the UK to our allies in Norway, in Finland, in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland and Moldova, who know very well what appeasement of Russia looks like and feels like?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his kind words. This is my message for the people of Eastern Europe. This is my message for the people of the UK. We remain committed to the principle that international borders must not be changed by force. Russia will not win. They are not winning. They are suffering terribly in trying to pursue a so-called operation which is bringing nothing but misery to the Russians. I hope that they realise that swiftly. I hope that they start ceasefire talks on the basis of the line of contact, and that Ukraine is in a position to secure its full and sovereign rights, and that is what the British government is committed to.
Kirsten Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Using the kidnapping of children as a weapon in its illegal invasion of Ukraine is absolutely abhorrent and wicked, and may I commend my honourable friend, the member for Paisley and Renfrewshire South and her sterling efforts to make sure that these children are not forgotten in this place. But unfortunately, this isn't the first time that children have been used as a weapon of war. We've seen it in Nigeria and other places in recent years. What more can this government do to ensure that this isn't normalised by dictators and despots across the world, and that children cannot be used as a weapon of war? And what more can be done to ensure the return of Ukraine's 20,000 stolen children?
Minister.
My honourable friend asks an incredibly important question. She is right that it is children who are bearing the worst brunts of conflict. I was in Yemen this week and appalled to see so many children with both moderate and severely acute malnutrition. That malnutrition is in very significant order created by the Houthis, who have restricted aid access into North Yemen and indeed detained UN aid workers and seized their offices. What happens in Ukraine, conducted by Russian forces, is seen elsewhere. It is seen by the Houthis, it's seen by militias in Nigeria. This country will stand up for an international rules-based order, which includes the protections that children are entitled to. We will continue to work to ensure the safe return of those 20,000 Ukrainian children. 600 of them have been identified by the mechanism which we co-fund and co-founded with the Ukrainians, and we will continue to work to ensure that all the remaining children are returned.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I welcome the courage of the American people over many, many decades in standing up for our liberties and defending our freedoms. May I also draw attention to the fact that this wonderful act of generosity has supported a US economy that has grown more powerfully, more capably, and in more directions than any other economy in human history, making the United States now the richest and most powerful country the world has ever known. Would he agree with me that that stance on the side of truth and justice genuinely has been a great blessing for all free peoples, and that standing against people traffickers, child traffickers, calling out, for example, folk like Jeffrey Epstein, but seeing here the world's largest child trafficker almost getting away with it, would be a betrayal of those great American values that have literally led to the happiness and prosperity of one of the wonderful countries of this world.
Minister.
I thank the gallant member for his question. The US and UK have stood together on questions of European order ever since the Second World War. I'm incredibly proud that it was a Labour Foreign Secretary that led the creation of NATO. I know that our American friends continue to see questions of European security and order as being of the utmost importance, and that security and order cannot coexist with a world in which territory is seized by force and children are abducted in exactly the way he describes.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The stealing of Ukrainian children by Putin is scandalous and equally devastating for the Ukrainian families impacted. Putin is showing no desire to ceasefire in Ukraine, with continued bombardments on the Ukrainian people day in, day out. Does he agree with me that until Putin demonstrates he is committed to returning these children and committed to a ceasefire, we must continue to provide Ukraine with all the military, economic and diplomatic support that it needs?
The honourable member puts it very well, and I do. We will continue to stand with Ukraine for all the reasons that honourable members have expressed this morning, and we will continue to do so until talks have started, until a just and sovereign future for Ukraine is secured.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Wokingham, there is a Ukrainian refugee community who have made a positive difference to the area. I have worked with local groups to help supply aid to civilians in Ukraine, and many have shared their concerns about the war and the safety of their relatives back home. I fully support the Honourable Member for Paisley and Renfrewshire on her comments about the 20,000 stolen Ukrainian children by the Russians. But can I ask the Minister, what is the government doing to reassure the many Ukrainians in my constituency that the UK support for Ukraine will remain steadfast against a Russian invasion, and that Putin will be held to account for his war crimes, and that Trump will not be allowed to backtrack on his support for Ukraine and NATO?
Minister.
I want to pay tribute, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the work of the honourable member and his constituents to support Ukrainians. I know that right across the House, both honourable members and their constituents have been engaged in supporting Ukrainians in many different ways. I myself have met with the Ukrainian community in Lincoln, and there are many people in Lincoln who've taken Ukrainians in or provided support. And I would like to assure all of those people that we will continue to stand with Ukrainians on these questions. He asks the important question about how we can continue to try and identify those children who have been seized by the Russians. There is work ongoing using often Russian databases themselves, which are relatively freely available, to identify where Ukrainian children are likely to have been taken in Russia. I imagine that Russian authorities think that people are not sufficiently interested to track individual children, and I can assure the House that we are, that we will continue to follow this to the end. We have identified 600 individual Ukrainian children by name alongside our Ukrainian friends. We will not forget the names of those children. We will not forget the locations of those children. The Russian families who have sought to take in those children should know that such an effort is ongoing, that it is supported right across the government, right across the House and right across the country. We will continue day in and day out to ensure those children are returned.
Adam Jogee.
Kind Madam Speaker, thank you. Using children in this way is sick, and there is no other word for it. Now, the people of Newcastle and Lyme opened their homes, they spoke out, they spoke up, and they stood with the people of Ukraine and still do. They raised money, they donated medical supplies, books and clothes, and I thank them all for their efforts and their commitment. But whilst we rightly support the people of Ukraine against Russia, we also see Russia continuing to seek influence in other parts of the world through money, through arms and the rest. So this is a geopolitical challenge that we think rightly in one part of the world we're getting right, but we can't afford to ignore in others. So can I ask the Minister what we're doing to help to ensure that we neutralise Russia's attempt at command and control in other parts of the world?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the important question. Russia exerts a malign influence not just, obviously, in Ukraine. We have seen their relationship with the Houthis. We have seen their relationships in Syria, and I'm glad to see that they have declined in recent months, but they continue through Africa Corps and a number of other arms of their state to be a malign influence right across the world. Their efforts are always at the expense of the populations where they are found. We continue to work with our friends and allies across the world. I was discussing malign Russian influence in Yemen in recent days. I have discussed it in Libya. I have discussed it in Syria, and we will continue to act across the world as you would expect, as I know my honourable friend pays close attention to. We will not rest while Russia continues to exert such a malign influence on global affairs. We wish to have a friendship. We have historic and long relations with the Russian people. I know that nothing would give greater pleasure to so many in the UK to have a more normal relationship with the Russian state than we currently do, but that will require significant changes from the Russian state, who continue to exert such a malign influence on global affairs.
Will Forster.
Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the most important things the UK can do to support Ukraine is push President Trump on a comprehensive G7 plan to seize the estimated £300 billion of Russian assets across those 7 nations and funnel them to Ukraine. Please can the Minister confirm what steps the government has taken to push President Trump on this, to build that international coordination on seizing Russian assets, including Sutton Place in my constituency of Woking.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question. We have worked across our allies and friends in order to ensure that there is a robust and unified approach to these issues. I've described some of the statements that we have made in recent days, and I can confirm that the Foreign Secretary discussed the questions engaged in Ukraine at some length with the Secretary of State on the sidelines of the G7 last week. We will continue to do all that we can and everything that it takes to ensure that we are putting the pressure on Russia that is required to ensure that this war comes to an end.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In September, I had the privilege of meeting in Kiev with Raisa Kravchenko and Yulia Klepets of the All Ukraine NGO Coalition for People with Intellectual Disabilities. They told me of the devastating impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine for disabled people. Will my honourable friend agree it is particularly distressing that when Russian forces have kidnapped Ukrainian children, they have targeted disabled children, and that when we can finally look to reconstruction and rebuilding Ukraine, specific support will be required for disabled people who have suffered so much as a result of Russia's aggression and crimes for which Russia must be held accountable.
My honourable friend is right. These are actions almost beyond comprehension. To be targeting disabled children in this way is a crime that will not be forgotten, and he's absolutely right that it is always the most vulnerable who are worst affected by conflict. That is particularly true of people who are disabled. It's something we consider in our own aid efforts in Ukraine, and of course must be considered as part of reconstruction efforts, as he says.
Jim Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for his answers and for his very strong focus for the Ukrainian children, for the Honourable Lady for Paisley as well, for all that she's done. We appreciate it. The trafficking of children and forced adoption of Ukrainian children to Russia is truly despicable. The re-education camps or the brainwashing of children to forget or to erase their Ukrainian heritage is detestable, and the need for British involvement is undeniable. So will the Minister outline, please, what steps we will take to bring these children home to their families instead of accepting that they are prisoners of war, which is disgusting, inhuman and contemptible?
I'd like to thank the honourable gentleman. His tone is absolutely right. I've described some of the tracing efforts that we're engaged in. Clearly, simply locating these children in Russia is not enough. They must be returned to. We will continue at every level. I know that the Minister for Europe has met with some of the organisations and civil society organisations involved in these efforts, as has Baroness Harman, our Special Envoy on Women and Girls. The Foreign Secretary has discussed them with her opposite numbers. We will continue to give this the focus that the honourable gentleman rightly demands of us, and I want to assure the country that we will continue to focus on this issue until those children are returned.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It would seem that the traditional role of the American President as someone who can straddle the world stage, working with friends and allies to achieve outcomes for the good across the world, are in danger of being diminished to those of someone who proffers capitulation on behalf of another sovereign nation. And that is something that we cannot accept. However, with regard to the children that are the focus of the debate today, and again I would pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Paisley and Renfrewshire South, as young people are returned, and hopefully in increasing numbers, what work can we do as a country and as a government to ensure the reintegration of those young people into the society that Putin has worked so hard to prevent them to being part of?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the question. We of course, must work to see these children returned. We're an active member of the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children. We work closely with the Ukrainian government on these questions. She is absolutely right that when children are returned, one can hardly imagine the trauma, the confusion, and the status of those children upon their return to Ukraine, and we will do what we can to support the Ukrainian government in their efforts in that area.
Jacob Collier.
Madam Deputy Speaker, all of us want to see peace in Ukraine, but it must be on the terms of the Ukrainian people that they are fully behind. Russia cannot gain or be seen to gain from their illegal and unprovoked invasion. So what assurances can the Minister give that this government will stand fully behind Ukraine in making sure that it is a peace agreement on their terms?
Minister.
My honourable friend has been a doughty champion for Ukraine's interests in this House, and he is right. We are working with our friends and allies, particularly at the G7. I've described the statement which we agreed last week in relation to questions of ceasefire and negotiations, which, as he says, must be on the basis of Ukraine's sovereign interests. And we will continue to work with G7 partners, condemning Russia's actions, condemning their provision of arms to others, as well as their actions in Ukraine, and increasing the economic costs to them, as we have set out in our most recent sanctions measures.
Can I thank the Minister for his responses this morning, and I will allow a few minutes for the front benches to swap over, during which time it might be helpful if I reminded members that in an urgent question, the questioner gets 2 minutes, the Minister gets 3 minutes to respond, the Liberal Democrat spokesman gets 1 minute. Any member posing a question that is approaching that 1 minute time might like to think about reducing the length of their question. Question, Robert Jenrick.
Madam Deputy Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for Justice if he will make a statement on the implications for national security and the management of terrorist offenders following disruption to the separation centre regime.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman raises a very important question. Separation centres are a vital part of our strategy to manage those posing the most significant terrorist risk. Following the horrific attack at HMP Franklin in April this year, we took immediate action to ensure safety in our separation centres. Today, everyone is safe and a stringent regime remains in place. Our prison officers are some of the hardest working and bravest public servants in this country. It is right that they feel safe as they work to protect the public. That is why, following the attack at Franklin, we, for the first time, mandated the use of protective body armour in our highest risk units, including our SCs. The DPM has recently announced a further £15 million investment in safety equipment, including to roll out up to 10,000 pieces of body armour to up to 500 staff trained in the use of tasers. The Abu judgment is very fact-specific. It does not threaten the integrity of the separation centres themselves. This government takes the judgment and others referenced very seriously. We are clear that any decision regarding segregation must comply with prison rules and human rights obligations, including under the European Convention of Human Rights. We are working to ensure our referral process is robust, and we are strengthening our ability to defend against legal challenges. Specialist staff continue to assess referrals rigorously, and placements are made only where that criteria is met. Let me be clear. The government will always put national security first. Separation centres remain an essential operational tool, and we will continue to use these specialist units to protect the public from the most dangerous of offenders.
Shadow Secretary of State Robert Jenrick.
Thank you. Saeed Abu is a danger to this country. This is an ISIS fanatic who bought a combat vest and a sword so he could, in his own words, shoot up a crowd. Yet this week the High Court ruled that keeping him apart from other prisoners to prevent him radicalising them was a breach of his human rights. We've reached a perverse situation where a terrorist's mental health is prioritised over national security and the protection of the very men and women in uniform who are targets for these dangerous individuals with very little to lose. He's now in line for a payout from the taxpayer. This isn't an isolated incident. This is the latest in a line, including the double murderer and extremist Fawad Awali and Denny De Silva. Every extremist housed in a separation centre may now be able to deploy this judgment to escape being housed in these units and get a payout. Terrorists are weaponising the ECHR and the public sector equalities duty to milk the state, and the Ministry of Justice is signing the cheques. I note that the Minister did not say that she would be appealing this judgment. The separation centre regime was created to counter highly subversive terrorists recruiting inside jail and to ensure the protection for prison officers. That is effectively collapsing. Prison governors are being paralysed just when there is a crisis of extremism and extreme violence in our prisons, necessitating more separation centres and more segregation. So I ask the Minister, will she finally publish Jonathan Hall KC's review into separation centres, which was produced as evidence in court, but which has not been published to this House or the country? Will she say that under no circumstances will any terrorists be rewarded in this manner, and bring forward emergency legislation to override this judgment, prevent payout, protect national security and protect our prison officers? I've said many times, It is only a matter of time before an officer gets killed by one of these monsters. Will she bring forward this legislation? If she does, she'll have our support. If she doesn't, we will.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman will very well be aware that I am unable to preempt the decisions that are yet to be taken by the courts. The Government will always ensure that taxpayer money is used responsibly and effectively. In relation to the most recent judicial review announced just yesterday, the Government is considering all of the available options, including the right to appeal. So I just want to put that on the record. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I find it quite disingenuous that the Right Honourable Gentleman, the almost leader of the opposition, talks about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. But can I ask him, if he feels so strongly about this, why his government did absolutely nothing on this when in government for 14 years? Where they talk about action, it is this Labour government that is acting. We have been very clear that we will not fail to act regarding reform of the ECHR. In fact, the Sentencing Minister is in Strasbourg right now having discussions with partners on a range of topics, including reform of the ECHR. He mentions the findings of Jonathan Hall KC's independent review of separation centres. The Government commissioned this following the attack on HMP Franklin, and Mr Hall's report and our response will be published in due course. But let me just say, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the avoidance of any doubt, it is the priority of this government and should be the priority of all governments to keep the public safe and to protect national security. And this government will always ensure that that is done.
Absolutely. Chair of the Justice Select Committee, Andy Slaughter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for reaffirming the government's support, which should not be necessary, for the rule of law and for the ECHR. And would she concentrate on what are the key points here? One is making sure that the most dangerous prisoners are held securely, and the second is ensuring the safety of prison officers. Will she say what the status of Jonathan Hall KC's review is? I understand it has been with the Lord Chancellor for some months. When are we going to see that, and when are we going to implement the recommendations of that report?
Yeah, I thank my honourable friend, the Chair of the Select Committee, for that question. Like I've stated, the Government is committed to ensuring that separation centres continue to prevent those posing the highest terrorist risk from influencing the wider prison population. That is precisely why we commissioned Jonathan Hall's independent review following that appalling attack at HMP Franklin. Mr Hall has delivered his findings, which we and the Lord Chancellor are grateful for, and we are considering very closely with the utmost seriousness. We will publish this review and the Government response very shortly, but we are taking all relevant steps to ensure that our prisons and our prison staff are safe.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Will Forster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What a sorry state of affairs. This case highlights the consequences of an overstretched and under-resourced prison system, including separation centres by the last Conservative government, of which the Right Honourable Member for Newark was a prominent member, who now has forgotten that. Please can the Minister confirm what assessment the Ministry of Justice has made of the decade of Tory underfunding and overcrowding, leaving prisons unable to safely manage violent extremists like we have been talking about today? Can the Minister outline how Abu's own ideology and violent behaviour escalated the need for extreme segregation measures? And finally, violent attacks on prison staff are on the rise. We have seen high-profile cases of prisoners, including one from my constituency of Woking, be accidentally released. So what assurances can the Minister give us as MPs that the public safety and protection of prison staff will be prioritised in the under-resourced prison system that they inherited from the Conservatives?
I thank the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for his questions and his constructive way in which he asks them. He is right to highlight the chronic underfunding of 14 years of Tory austerity on our prison service and on our criminal justice system. It is right that if you degrade in your duty to look after our criminal justice system, this sadly is the result of what happens. We are slowly beginning to pick up the pieces of what was left of our criminal justice system when we came into office 18 months ago, but this yet again is just another example of where the previous government have failed to keep us safe, failed to invest in our prison service, and this is the result. Look, we realise that more needs to be done here, and we are committed to doing so. As I've stated, I want to pay tribute again to the brilliant prison staff, prison officers who are working in intolerable conditions in our prisons. We are committed to investing in them, making sure that they are safe, as I've already stated, that effective body armour, that better training. We are listening to them and the governors of the prisons directly as well about what they need, because they are the best people on the ground to identify those needs and that reassurance. We are working with them, and I extend that hand across the aisle to work with him and the party opposite to ensure that we get this right for the sake of everyone.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The European Convention on Human Rights has safeguarded the lives and rights of many people. Can the Minister please tell the House what the Law Society of England and Wales thinks about the opposition's plans to leave the ECHR?
I mean, my honourable friend makes a very valid point here. This is a convention who has served in the past the victims of John Warboys, the families of the 97 killed in the Hillsborough disaster, British troops who died in Iraq. It underpins the Good Friday Agreement, and it is frankly quite astonishing that the party opposite, after 14 years of failing to do anything on the ECHR, are seeking for us to withdraw when the only other country to have withdrawn is Russia under Vladimir Putin. Is that the company the party opposite want to keep? We are working to ensure that our referral process is robust, and we are strengthening our ability here to defend against any legal challenges. The specialist staff continue to assess referrals rigorously, and placements are made only when that criteria is met. But to answer his question specifically, the Conservative government, as we've already heard, left our prisons at breaking point. They were at 99% capacity, and the Law Society of England and Wales has stated that the answer to that is not leaving the ECHR.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Well, when it comes to terrorists, I think what's worrying a lot of us is the fact that people are pouring across the channel illegally and there's absolutely no check whatsoever on them. She may not be able to answer this now, but I'd be interested in the state of the law. Surely this is really a very risky thing for our nation, that our enemies could be infiltrating our country in this way. So would it be possible under the convention, the Refugee Convention, to detain all illegal migrants, do full background checks, put them in separation centres, whatever you like, so that we can check that these people are actually safe?
No, I thank him for that question. We are working very closely with the Home Office on this and our proposals regarding reform of the ECHR. As the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, we are bringing forward legislation to exactly clarify how Article 8 of that ECHR, that right to a private life, operates domestically in relation to immigration rules, to ensure an appropriate balance between the rights of individuals and the national interest. The Right Honourable Gentleman speaks from a sedentary position regarding Article 3. Again, we are looking at the interpretation of Article 3, so that varied prison conditions or access to healthcare are not a bar to extradition or deportation. I reiterate our commitment that we will do everything we can to keep our national security safe, and I would be happy to write to him with more information and clarification on those points.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for her statement? The Franklin attack was awful. Given body armour is crucial for the safety of prison staff, can she please tell us more about the procurement of body armour so prison staff are protected as best as possible, as soon as possible?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. It is right that we equip our prison officers with the most robust security and protection possible. That is why we are working with them. We are working with the unions and the governors to ensure that all steps are taken. It is also really important, I want to stress here, that prisoners' mental health needs are taken into account. We have medical staff advising on the placement within separation centres. On the procurement exactly, I'd be happily to write to him on with further details on that, but I want to reassure him that we are doing all we can, working with our prison staff who are working in exceptional circumstances to ensure that they feel reassured and they feel safe.
Julian Lewis.
Normally, I like the Minister's can-do attitude. So is she really telling the House that this government would rather make payouts to terrorists than to disapply the ECHR?
Well, I am grateful for the question from the Right Honourable Gentleman. I do have a can-do attitude, and I am willing to do everything we can as a government to ensure that we get this right and we keep our public safe and our prison officers safe and we keep dangerous criminals locked up where they belong. What I can tell him is he will be aware that the legal proceedings are still ongoing. As I reiterate, we are looking at all options available here, including the right to appeal, because we will be as responsible and effective with taxpayers' money as possible.
Andrew Snowden.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hashim Abedi was in a separation centre at HMM Franklin when he attacked 3 prison officers with hot cooking oil. Under these rulings and these interventions on European courts determining the human rights of these convicted and violent terrorists, does the Minister really think it would be appropriate for this individual to be given access to a kitchen?
Yeah.
I will not preempt the findings and the outcome of Jonathan Hall's review. But what I will tell him is that we believe in separation centres. They are a valuable tool, as the judgments state. What we are ensuring is that all of our prison officers are kept safe, and once the recommendations are published of Jonathan Hall's review and the government has carefully considered those recommendations, I will happily speak with him and work with him to ensure that they are followed through.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This terrorist was moved to a separation centre over concerns that he would use his extremist Islamist ideology to radicalise others, yet the ruling says that this move was a breach of his right to a private life under the European Convention. Shouldn't national security and prison officers' safety come first? And will she rule out paying any money to this terrorist?
Again, I echo my previous comments. We cannot preempt the judicial decision, and we are looking at all rights to that in terms of appeal here regarding that point. But on the separation centres, look, there is select criteria for prisoners dedicated to going into a separation centre. Prisoners will only be selected if other options have all been considered, and that this is not the case if it is the most desirable location. They are entitled to challenge their selection and raise complaints if needed. However, our priority remains, as I have stated, to the safety and security of our prisons, our prison staff and the general public.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The key issue here is that, of course, making a decision about whether someone goes into a secluded area and kept away from other prisoners is a judgment call. So what assessment has the Minister made of the implications of this judgment on what will happen to terrorists who should be separated from other prisoners?
For that question, look, separation centres were never intended for use with all terrorist offenders. They exist to separate the most pernicious radicalisers, and we are achieving this aim successfully using the current separation centre's capacity, which is kept under regular review. We are awaiting the findings of the Jonathan Hall review, and we will be looking at the judgment from yesterday's decision closely to ensure that all steps are taken and that we are working with governors, prison officers to ensure the best steps forward. But we are determined to ensure that prisons are kept safe.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for her answers? And Minister, always trying to be helpful, of course, in relation to it. In Northern Ireland, we've dealt with the spread of extreme forms of paramilitarism within our prisons, and have learned that the most hard-line prisoners, their influence easily and completely spreads to those who enter prisons for perhaps petty crime, and we're coming out the other end with hatred that they never felt before. Those with extremist views should not be able to consolidate and proselytise or convert people to extremist views, and younger inmates in particular. Others have referred to legislative change. Could I ask the Minister, perhaps, because of what we've learned in Northern Ireland, would it be helpful to contact the Prisons Minister in the Northern Ireland Assembly to get their ideas of how they've done it, and perhaps we can be helpful for each other? Thank you.
I am grateful to that question and the extension of an offer to help. I will ensure that that is followed up with our counterparts in Northern Ireland. Look, we will follow the evidence and do what works in order to keep our prisons safe. We will assess the risks of any further radicalisation within our separation centres and our prisons to ensure that this is not happening, that anyone with a danger that these individuals pose to extend their views to the prison population or to the public are kept under review. And I look forward to working with counterparts in Northern Ireland to share knowledge and expertise to ensure that we get this right for everyone across the United Kingdom.
Can I thank the Minister for her short, sharp answers this morning, perhaps a masterclass for what is to follow. Business questions will run for an hour and no more this morning. I'll allow a few moments for the front bench to swap over. Brings us to business questions this morning. Shadow Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Leader of the House give us the forthcoming business?
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The business for the week commencing 24th of November will include Monday the 24th of November, remaining stages of the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, Day 1. Tuesday the 25th of November, remaining stages of the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, Day 2. On Wednesday the 26th of November, my Right Honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will deliver her budget statement. And on the Thursday the 27th of November, a continuation of the budget statement. Friday the 28th of November, the House will not be sitting. The provisional business for the week commencing the 1st of December includes Monday the 1st of December, continuation of the budget debate, Tuesday the 2nd of December, conclusion of the budget debate. Wednesday the 3rd of December, remaining stages of the pension schemes bill. Thursday the 4th of December, debate on a motion on the war in Ukraine, followed by a general debate on St Andrew's Day. The subject for these debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee, and Friday the 5th of December, the House will not be sitting.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by recording my thanks to the Leader of the House for agreeing to the request to have the Ukraine debate on December the 4th. I think we all feel very warmly about that decision. Madam Deputy Speaker, politics at the present moment may not be enormously pretty, but it has been a week of triumph in the sporting world. We have had the joyous mayhem of Scotland reaching their first World Cup for 28 years. But let us not forget the extraordinary thumping which the England rugby team dealt out to the All Blacks at the weekend, or the perfect World Cup qualification record of our English footballers. In that spirit, I hope many, if perhaps not all, members of this House will join me in sending our best wishes to the England cricket team as they prepare for the opening test in Perth tomorrow. Madam Deputy Speaker, this has been another week in which the headlines have not been kind to the government and its allies. They have reported that the Prime Minister has spent a sixth of his time in office abroad. That is 2.5 months to date outside the UK since the last election. Half of all UK jobs lost since the government came to power are among the under 25s. That's 80,000 more young people out of work since July 2024. Agency staff brought into work during Birmingham's 8-month-long bin strike by members of Unite have now themselves decided to go on strike. The former Deputy Prime Minister is reported to be planning a leadership bid following last week's speculation about the Health Secretary and last month's unfortunate foray by the Mayor of Manchester. Since Labour took office, the energy price cap has not fallen but risen by £187 to £1,755. Madam Deputy Speaker, I often wonder if the government has forgotten that there is a world outside London and our biggest cities. So in that spirit, I hope I may raise a couple of important issues on which I'd be grateful for the Leader's assistance. The first is local. Last weekend, the village of Lewis Harold in my constituency was devastated by flooding as a result of Storm Claudia. The village was inundated after record levels of rainfall flooded the Dewless Brook, with water levels rising to the highest ever recorded by the monitoring station. The emergency services were called out to help vulnerable residents and houses. Local pubs and other businesses were severely damaged. Many local people have been involved in clearing up the mess, in particular the brilliant Young Farmers Club, but it will take months for the village to get fully back on its feet. The House, you will know, Madam Deputy Speaker, was given time to debate the severe flooding in nearby Monmouthshire in Wales yesterday. So may I ask the Leader of the House now if he would encourage both the Environment Agency and DEFRA to take the swiftest and most comprehensive action to protect Lewis Harold and other flood-hit areas across England in order to prevent this from happening again. The second issue is a national one. The Listed Places of Worship grant scheme helps thousands of churches, synagogues, mosques and temples and other places of worship to reclaim or to get grants to cover the VAT paid on repair and maintenance work. It's a small but very useful and cost-effective institution that has quietly worked away over more than 2 decades to preserve the historic fabric of our nation. Unfortunately, since the last election, the size of the scheme has been cut in half and a new cap imposed on the level of individual grants. It's a feature of these repairs that if they are not made, the damage often leads to enormous further costs. Government seems determined to maintain or increase public spending in other areas. Given that and the very small relative sums involved, could I ask the Leader to pick this matter up with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and see if this scheme cannot be quickly restored to its previous glory?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Shadow Leader for his questions. Can I first of all, through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, thank Mr Speaker for his timely reminder this week of our responsibilities in this House regarding national security. As the House will know, the Security Service issued an espionage alert to Parliament highlighting targeted outreach by Chinese Ministry of State Security to individuals in our community. This is a very serious matter which the government takes very seriously, and I know Mr Speaker does too. So I would urge all MPs to heed this advice and report any suspicious activity immediately. Next week, Madam Deputy Speaker, is Parliament Week, where we encourage young people and the public to engage with the UK's democratic system and institutions. And in that spirit, I was delighted yesterday to meet with children from East Hunsbury Primary School, winners of the Kind School Award, this week after the Honourable Member for Northampton South raised the school during business questions. It was a great pleasure to meet with them. They were a credit to their school, their parents, but most of all to themselves. And it's a reminder to us all of the importance of being kind. And you will be pleased to know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I've been made an honorary kindness ambassador. Which I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, is an honour which I never received during my time as the Chief Whip. I was, as the Honourable Gentleman has already said, pleased to announce in this week's business that the Backbench Business Committee has chosen Ukraine as a subject for their forthcoming debate on the 4th of December, and I thank the Shadow Leader, I thank the Liberal Democrat spokesman, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, and the Honourable Member for Harwich and North Essex for their representations to help secure the debate. And members will welcome, Madam Deputy Speaker, the publication of the Men's Health Strategy this week, an important topic which again has been raised frequently during business questions. The strategy will address the stark inequalities in men's health to create a society where men and boys are supported to live healthier and happier lives. And I would encourage members to engage in the debate later today on International Men's Day. And as the Honourable Gentleman has said, it's been a good week for sport. And I want to congratulate Scotland for qualifying for the World Cup for the first time since 1998. And just remind the House that the only time that a home nation has actually won the World Cup was under a Labour government. Let me turn to the remarks of the Shadow Leader and address some of his list, at least. He complains about the amount of time that the Prime Minister has spent abroad. Well, that reflects two things, I think, above all, Madam Deputy Speaker. One is the uncertainty of the international situation. But the second is he spent a great deal of time addressing the issue of trade and bringing investment into this country. And therefore, when the Honourable Gentleman raises the issue of jobs, he's surely got to realise that getting good trade deals, which his government was not prepared to do or able to do, will actually not only bring investment to our country, but it will actually turn into jobs, hopefully, across our nation. He quite rightly raises the issue of flooding, and I will draw to the attention of DEFRA and the Environment Agency the urgency of this situation in ensuring, as far as we can, that preparations are made should this happen in the future. But I would gently also encourage him to encourage some of his colleagues on his side of the House to actually start recognising the effect of climate change. Thirdly, he talks about the listed place of worship, and as a constituency MP, he has absolutely every right to do so. I have to say, his constituency and neighbouring constituencies have some fantastic churches, and many of them are in need of repair going forward. I'm not going to comment on matters of VAT or possibly tax changes. We've only a few days before the budget, but I will draw his concerns not only to the attention of DCMS, but also to the Treasury. Thank you.
Barry Gardner.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the speedy passage of environmental legislation through this House is not often a feature. So can I thank the Leader of the House for the speedy way in which the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdictions Treaty was dealt with by the government. In contrast, can I remind him that in 2023, our party said that we would bring forward legislation for a new Clean Air Act. Now, I've no doubt that the Leader of the House is thinking of what may be going into the King's Speech next year, given that it will be the 70th anniversary of the original Clean Air Act.
could he perhaps put that one forward as something that this House really does need to look at to ensure that we are meeting the WHO standards?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's comments, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Biodiversity Treaty is an important step forward. And I thank him for all the work that he has done in this regard. The government is committed to environmental improvement, and although I expect that the second session will be quite crowded, I'll certainly bear in mind his comments.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I join the leader in a thanks to the Speaker for the seriousness in which he's taking the Chinese interference in our democracy. I represent many Hong Kongers in my constituency and they're deeply concerned about this issue. Madam Deputy Speaker, it was a relief to hear that it's confirmed that the budget will be taking place on the floor of this House next week. I'm sure it'll be a huge relief also to advisers in the Treasury, who've just got days away now to start leaking the 2026 budget. One thing that people will be looking out for in the budget next week is what provisions are going to be made for children with special educational needs and disabilities. I'm fully aware that this is a crisis that was inherited by this government, but it was one that was not unforeseen. We're 18 months into this government now, and we've heard that their major reform plans have been pushed back again. So that is a disappointment to us on those benches. We're seeing councils go bankrupt over this, teachers are in despair, families are being held in legal limbo, and ultimately we're failing children at the end of all this. And I do appreciate that there are some really tricky issues to resolve. We need to balance the legal entitlements on paper with the quality provision in reality, and we do need to adjust to this world where there are greater diagnosis rates than there were before. But I think there are some actions that the government could take right away, in particular in relation to, Madam Deputy Speaker, the private placements that are ongoing. These have trebled in the last decade. They cost more than double the cost of a state placement, around about £60,000. And what we do know is that private equity have been really aggressive in this space, taking on institutions, eating up market share, and are reportedly making profit margins around about 20%. Now, in the Children Wellbeing and Schools Bill, the government did introduce the idea of profit caps on those that are being exploitative in the children's social care sector. So I wonder if the leader can ask the relevant minister if this could be extended to the SEND schools as well.
Speaker, he's right to raise concern about the SEND system because the government has acknowledged that it is broken. It doesn't work for parents and it doesn't work for children either. He's also right to say that there were signs that things were not as they should be, but it's one of the many issues that when we came to government we discovered was even worse than we'd anticipated beforehand. I'm not going to comment on what might or might not be in the budget, but I would gently point out that we've already invested an additional £1 billion into SEND. And we're also creating more specialist places in mainstream schools with an additional £740 million on top of the £1 billion. We will be bringing forward the schools white paper. He may wish to keep some of his suggestions to that, or maybe call a debate on it to give further clarity to what he's saying. We're bringing that forward early in the next year. I know it is frustrating. It's frustrating for our constituents as well. But the important thing is we need to work with parents and we need to work with teachers. And the most important thing is that we get it right.
Rosie Writing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On that note, since being elected, the number of constituents who've raised difficulties and delays in the SEND system with me has been staggering. So I asked my constituents to fill in my SEND survey online so they can feed into the government's schools white paper. That survey now has 250 responses, which I think shows the extent of the problem. So will the Leader of the House join me in thanking those parents in Kettering, but across the country, who are using their own experiences to feed in to this government's mission to fix a broken system we inherited?
Very pleased to do that, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank everyone who has responded to my honourable friend's survey. That is the way, one of the very best ways of getting information from parents, and the scale of that demonstrates the scale of the problems in the system. But I also want to pay tribute to her for the work that she has done on this issue. As I said previously, we are committed to creating a SEND system which truly works for children and for parents. As the white paper comes forward, I'm sure my honourable friends' constituents' comments will be reflected in that process.
Chair of the Backbench Business Committee, Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Leader for announcing the business for the 4th of December in the Chamber. I understand that there is a potential that the House may suspend for a period of time because of a state visit. So I would ask, could he give consideration for protected time, because these are two very heavily subscribed debates. Also, if you can give us an indication as to whether we'll get the 11th of December in the Chamber, because we're now in the position whereby, with our backlog of debates, if we have every Thursday between now and the Easter recess, we can fill every single debate. I note that the House rose very early yesterday, and if the government is having a problem with business, we can always put on debates to allow colleagues from the backbenches to debate what they wish to debate in government time. If we're given Thursday the 18th of December, it will be the traditional pre-recess adjournment debate for Christmas. The business in Westminster Hall next week, on Tuesday the 25th, will be a debate on potential impact of immigration reforms on humanitarian visa routes. And on Thursday the 27th, there'll be because of the budget debate in the Chamber, there will be a Select Committee statement from the Business and Trade Committee, followed by debates on the impact of extended producer responsibility for packaging, followed by a debate on protecting children from domestic abuse. On the 2nd of December, there'll be a debate on the adequacy of funding to support homeless people, and on the 4th of December, a debate on comprehensive acquired brain injury action plan, followed by a debate on seafarers' welfare. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, today is the 80th anniversary of the start of the Nuremberg trials. And earlier this week, we had a very good briefing at the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Holocaust Memorial and Education Centre from Adam Wagner. He's a renowned human rights lawyer. 24 Nazis were put on trial, and the trial lasted for 11 months. At the end of that, 22 of them were sentenced to either very long-term prison sentences or death. 2, amazingly enough, were acquitted. So it would be, I think, very helpful if we could have a statement from the Education Secretary on incorporating the business of the Nuremberg trials into the national curriculum, because this was the first time when human rights law started to come to the fore, particularly on war crimes and crimes against humanity. So I would ask the Leader, could he arrange for that to happen?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I certainly welcome the honourable gentleman back to his place and thank him for raising these important matters. On the later matters that he raises, the Nuremberg trials do mark a reassertion of justice, human rights and accountability, and the 80th anniversary is a stark reminder of the need to commit to international criminal justice, and it is one of the government's top priorities in supporting the international legal order. I'll give consideration to what he says about a statement, but also make sure that the Secretary of State for Education is aware of the honourable gentleman's comments. On the question of protected time, I would certainly give consideration to that. He knows that I'm sympathetic to that. I don't think it's appropriate in every occasion, but I do think it's sympathetic should the House be adjourned for any, suspended for any particular reason. And I'll let him know about the 11th of December at the earliest opportunity. But just let me gently say to him, yes, of course, this week has been a little bit up and down in terms of the hours and the debates and the statements that we had. It's always a slight difficulty in getting balance into that, but it's not a problem for the government and its business. It's a problem for the opposition. If they can't turn up in numbers to hold the government to account, what are they doing?
Chris Hinchliffe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nearly 2/3 of the land in our country is owned by a handful of aristocrats, oligarchs and bankers who often hide their wealth in trusts and corporations which never die. So can we have a debate on how we may raise more revenue from these ultra-rich landowners and so afford some more generous proposals on agricultural property relief for the farmers who are essential for our food security, nature restoration and climate action?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend in raising this issue and join with him in acknowledging the vital work that farmers do which is one of the reasons why we're investing £5 billion over 2 years into the farming budget. I'm not going to preempt the budget, and therefore I would say, having just announced 4 days of budget debate, I'm sure that my honourable friend will wish to raise these points and amplify these points during that time.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Brain tumour research state that 1 in 3 people are likely to know someone with a brain tumour. That could be our friends, family or constituents. Brain tumours are a cruel disease, and yet drug development and research has stagnated, denying patients access to life-saving treatment. Will the Leader of the House allow a debate in government time on the immediate investment needed to improve brain tumour research and improve outcomes?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd invite the honourable gentleman to request a debate, either an adjournment debate or a backbench business debate, because I think what that will illustrate is not just from a constituency point of view, but how many of us have been affected personally or family or friends with the terrible consequences that can arise from brain tumours. The government is absolutely committed to doing as much as they can in this regard, not least through the 10-year health plan. So I think the debate would be a great opportunity, not just to hear about the problem, but to hear about what the government is intending to do about it.
Kirstine Sullivan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, churches are the bedrock of our communities and play a particularly strong role at the heart of our villages. St Philomena's Church in Winchborough has been a centre of spiritual, community and cultural life for 100 years and celebrated this milestone with a special Mass led by Archbishop Leo Cushley on the 26th of October. Will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Father Deacon, Father Henderson and Deacon Robertson, as well as the congregation of St Philomena's, and wish them all the best for the years ahead?
Speaker, I will join with my honourable friend in congratulating Father Henderson, Deacon Robertson and the parishioners of the venerable parish of St Philomena. As she rightly points out, places of worship provide a variety of services, often above and beyond the religious purpose in the strictest sense that they are there for. They're at the very heart of our local communities, and I wish them well for the next 100 years.
Julian Lewis.
Last Thursday, there was a heavily subscribed debate in Westminster Hall about the terrible problem of rogue and con men builders who fleece people of thousands upon thousands of pounds for work never completed and often not done at all. May we have a statement from an appropriate minister on the need to consider criminalising this process whereby people are robbed of their money but told afterwards that it only constitutes a civil offence?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman raises a really important matter, and he will know, having been in this House for quite some time, it's a perennial problem. I will draw it to the attention of the Minister and see whether a statement or perhaps he might wish to seek a debate on these matters.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At this time of year, the fireworks debate always rages. As a dog owner, I too share the views of my constituents in Southend Weston Lee that we need safer, more controlled firework legislation, not just for the sake of animals, but for people too. I recently met with the Fireworks Impact Coalition, who are also calling for a review. Will the Leader grant a debate in government time to discuss this important issue further?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this question. He isn't the first member to raise it with me, particularly over the last few weeks. As he knows, it's not just a question of the run-up to bonfire night, but we're approaching end-of-year celebrations as well, and pet owners will once again be worried for their pets. It's important that measures are proportionate with regard to fireworks, but it is such a big topic for MPs. I do think if he was to get a debate on this, he would find it particularly well attended.
Vera Hobhouse.
Deputy Speaker, today I'm speaking on behalf of one constituent, but there are many similar examples. This constituent, who doesn't want to be named because to protect herself, is losing out quite substantially financially because the child maintenance service is failing to enforce the regular payments she is owed. The non-resident parent makes one partial payment after another and then simply defaults again. The CMS has the necessary powers but is not using them effectively to stop this cycle. So can we have a debate in government time on how the CMS can actually enforce timely payments of child maintenance?
Speaker, the Honourable Lady raises an issue which again is a fairly constant matter in our constituency postbags and inboxes. The CMS is committed to ensuring that separated parents support their children financially and that powers should be used. But in all too many cases, as she alludes to, that isn't happening. So I will raise it with the appropriate minister if she lets me have details in confidence and see if we can resolve the matter.
Dave Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This weekend, a very special service will be leaving the station at Chasewater Railway in Burntwood in my constituency. The Hospital Santa Special Charity Trains are a Christmas service for seriously ill children offered completely free of charge. This year, 1,300 kids and their families are expected to attend. So can I ask if the Leader of the House will join me in congratulating Chasewater Railway, their trustees and their fantastic volunteers for the wonderful work that they're doing, spreading the festive spirit.
I'm happy to do so, Madam Deputy Speaker, congratulating Chasewater Railway for spreading this joy this holiday season. He talks about a huge number of people that will be part of that, and I thank Chasewater Railway for that. But of course it happens, these initiatives happen, not just because of the rail, but the volunteers that play their part. So I want to place on record our thanks to them and indeed volunteers across the country.
Wendy Morton.
Deputy Speaker, this week the Birmingham bin strike escalated further, and now even the agency workers who've been keeping a minimal service going have voted to join the strike from the 1st of December. I did raise this with the Leader of the House previously. I've been promised a statement, but the situation has only gotten worse since then. So can the Leader assure me that we will get that statement before this new wave of action begins to take place next month? Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady knows that our priority has always been Birmingham residents, and it's an issue in the first instance for employers, but it is important that the Council works with Unite to end the strike, which is the end of the strike is long overdue, and to work with the Council to tackle the concerns regarding agency and long-standing issues of equal pay. We remain in close contact with the Council. We continue to monitor the situation. MHCLG are looking into this and will update the House at the earliest opportunity.
Ms Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday evening I had the privilege of hosting the British Standards Institute at a reception in Speaker's House to mark the launch of the UK's first national suicide prevention standard, Suicide in the Workplace. It's a huge step forward in making suicide prevention everybody's business, and I want to thank all those involved. Can we have a debate in government time on how we can support employers and other organisations to implement and make the most of this important guidance?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to thank my honourable friend for her tireless campaigning on this topic. As she knows, the government is committed to reducing the number of lives lost to suicide. It remains the biggest killer of men under 50. And we have announced investment in suicide prevention projects for men as part of the first ever men's health strategy for England. I think her concerns will be shared across the House, and I would suggest that she should call for a debate in Westminster Hall. Thank you.
Dave Dugan.
Because I don't understand the mindset of an absent parent that would try and renege on their financial responsibilities to support their children. Neither, it seems, does the CMS understand their mindset either, because one of the manifold issues with the CMS is absent parents reneging on the payments, then they start the payments, then they stop the payments, then they start the payments, and the CMS resets the clock every time. So the receiving parent has to start from the very beginning every time. Can we please have a debate on the manifold issues with the CMS on government time and try and find a way forward from this deeply dysfunctional agency?
Much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will draw the honourable gentleman's comments to the attention of ministers, because as he's just heard, it's the second time that it's been raised this morning. He wished to initiate such a debate, however, because as I suggested before, concerns are shared, I'm sure, across the House.
Nick Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, coal miners powered our great country in the 20th century. They need justice in this century with their pensions. Labour put right the mine workers' pension scheme, but parity is needed for the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme.
Here, here.
Can the Leader of the House please ask the Treasury for a statement on pension justice for our mining communities to right this historic wrong?
Hear, hear.
I thank the honourable gentleman for all of his work on this issue, Madam Deputy Speaker. He's raised it a number of times with me, and indeed colleagues have raised it a number of times in business questions, so there is a real interest there. Ministers continue to meet with the BCSS trustees, but as my honourable friend knows, I've just announced the future business, and there will be two opportunities. The first is that we will have a debate following the budget where he may wish to go into more detail about this, but also there's some pension legislation coming down the track too.
Andrew Rossendale.
Madam Deputy Speaker, concerns have been raised across the country by animal lovers, most especially by Katie Amos, the daughter of our late dear friend, who's continuing the battle for animal welfare across the country. The concerns are that 7-day statutory period of many healthy dogs are not being offered for adoption in homes that take in stray animals, that instead they are euthanased without transparency. For example, one shelter receiving dogs from several councils lists only a handful available for rehoming, despite far higher intake figures. This lack of accountability is deeply troubling. So, will the Leader of the House make time for members to examine whether stronger reporting requirements and safeguards are needed to protect these animals? And may we have a debate on the welfare of stray dogs transferred by local authorities to contracted shelters?
The honourable gentleman raises very sad and often abhorrent cases, actually, where this happens, and he's absolutely right to raise this. Should he seek a debate, he could perhaps amplify his message, and others could join with him, so that anyone who is engaged in the practices that he's talking about recognises the scale of the concern. And if they can't change their, the way in which they work or the way in which they operate, then the government will need to consider whether or not legislation is adequate.
Chris Bloor.
Jerry Marsden has been collecting for the Poppy Appeal in Redditch for 40 years. Since becoming the Poppy Appeal organiser, he has helped to raise over £500,000. At the same time, he has readily stepped in to lead the local Royal British Legion to ensure our town celebrates and marks the sacrifice made by those to protect our freedoms. Jerry will hate me doing this, but would the Leader of the House join me in thanking Jerry and all those that support him for his incredible contribution to Redditch and for all those that have served?
Delighted to do so, Madam Deputy Speaker, and let me say a big thank you to Jerry and indeed everyone else involved with the Redditch Royal British Legion fundraising campaign. But let me also extend that, Madam Deputy Speaker, to all the volunteers across our country who do such a fantastic job, particularly at this time of year, but of course throughout the year. Thank you.
Helen Morgan.
Deputy Speaker, my constituents are no strangers to flooding, whether that's from the Rivers Severn and Vyrnwy in villages like Melverley, or from surface water or inadequate infrastructure in Gebowen and Hadnall. But the Environment Agency says that another 1,600 properties in my constituency will be vulnerable to surface water flooding by 2050, and the Planning and Infrastructure Bill has failed to address flooding or climate change at all. So given that the government voted down my amendments and those of my Lib Dem colleagues intended to tackle this problem, can we have a debate or a statement from the relevant minister on how the UK is going to build flood resilience in the future?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a concern across many constituencies. I'm sorry to hear what's happening in the Honourable Lady's constituency, but again, I'd invite her to seek a debate, because there are many areas that will share their concern, and she can put those questions directly to ministers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 110 years ago this month, Mary Barber, who was born in Cobarkin in my constituency, led the Glasgow rent strikes, standing up to improve housing conditions for working people. The legacy of that strike gave us the Rent Restrictions Act, a landmark safeguard that shielded tenants from exploitative profiteering right up until the wave of Thatcher-era deregulation. Will the Leader of the House join me in recognising Mary's legacy and also perhaps calling out the SNP government in Holyrood for undermining it, with 13 councils across Scotland now forced to declare a housing emergency and 10 5,000 children in Scotland left stuck in homeless accommodation.
Thank you very much indeed. I will join my honourable friend in recognising the important legacy of Mary Barber. I would invite her perhaps to seek an adjournment debate in which she could not only highlight the housing emergency which she refers to in Scotland, but she might also want to put on record that Scotland has secured a record funding settlement this year, and therefore they should be held to account for that.
Because thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday I attended the drop-in session in aid of those who suffer from Huntington's disease. And as is often the case when you attend these events, they sign you up as a champion, which they duly did with me. So my first role as champion is to highlight the new NICE guidelines that have been issued for those suffering from this disease, and hope that the League could perhaps ask the Health Secretary to bring forward a statement to explain how quickly these new guidelines can be implemented to help those suffering from this awful disease.
Congratulate the honourable gentleman in being a champion. It's been a good week for awards for us, really, between us, kindness and champion. Huntington's disease is a terrible disease, and it's fantastic work by people across communities that have kept this in the mind's eye, and also that NICE guidelines are addressing that, and the need for speed, I'm sure, is in the minds of those who are involved. So I will raise this matter with the Health Secretary.
Marinda Just.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last weekend, I attended the annual conference of Interfaith Wolverhampton in my constituency of Wolverhampton West, who have done much to bring different faith communities together, including those of no faith, and to celebrate diversity, which is so needed at a time when we are facing division and hate crime. However, the Conservative government withdrew all funding from the National Interfaith Network charity, forcing it to shut down. So will the Leader of the House please meet with me and the relevant minister to discuss restoration of the National Interfaith Network so that it can provide support again for interfaith organisations across the country?
Madam Deputy Speaker, interfaith relations are absolutely vital for strong and cohesive communities, and last week was Interfaith Week, a chance for communities to come together and celebrate different faiths and beliefs. I will make sure that ministers have heard my honourable friend's specific concerns, and of course I'm always happy to meet with them.
Tessa Munt.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to return, if I may, to the listed places of worship scheme. And although departmental policy is to keep grant funding records for 7 years, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport uses grant records only for the last 3 years since 2022, as only that data is considered reliable. I wondered if the Leader of the House will... he will know that the backbench business debates are taken until the next King's speech, and there's a massive queue for Westminster Hall and adjournment debates, but in hope and endless optimism, I might ask him for a debate about financial record keeping, as neither the Secretary of State nor the Treasury can possibly assess the value and importance and impact of schemes like this if they've no idea where the money's gone, and because record keeping is so poor, or it's inaccurate, or the records have been lost.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I accept that the backbench business list is long, but adjournment debates are chosen frequently, and I would encourage colleagues to request them and see where they get to. But again, as I mentioned before, Treasury matters are things that she may wish to raise in the budget debate. She doesn't need wait for an adjournment debate. She could raise matters in the budget.
Maya Ellis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Preston-based Keytech in my constituency is a British-based and owned technology and engineering company which employs around 50 staff and provides the live update data and displays for almost 80% of all UK rail passenger journeys, including much of the London Underground. Their biggest competitors, Hitachi, Siemens, etc., are all foreign-owned, but when I visited the company last week, their chief executive, Denise Lawrenson, shared that in a recent meeting she'd had with DFT officials, she was advised that while buying local is encouraged in government procurement, there is no firm accountability, leading to many contracts still going abroad rather than investing in British companies and British growth. Would the leader join me in congratulating this brilliant northern tech company on their 26 years of innovation and keeping the UK moving? And might he consider a debate on how this government can put British SMEs at the heart of our growth plans?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do join my honourable friend in thanking Keytech for their contribution over so many years, and I also thank her for her assiduous work for her constituents and for businesses in her constituency. We have consulted on further procurement reforms to boost domestic supply chains and create more opportunities for local businesses. She could seek a debate on this, but as I'm busy doing to many of the questions today, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to say we've got 4 days of budget debate in which some of these issues will be particularly relevant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The 1st to the 7th of December is Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week, being run by Crohn's and Colitis UK on raising awareness and generating conversations about what it's like to live with the condition. Many members in this House will know people, and they will most certainly have constituents who suffer with this condition that will never talk about it because of the stigma about talking about things relating to our bowels. Most people dismiss it as an irritable bowel or something to do with diarrhoea, when in fact it is crippling internal ulcers that generate internal bleeding and blood clots. I have watched my brave wife battle this condition for over 10 years, including 2 life-changing surgeries, the last of which required 9 hours in theatre. This is a disease that is crippling, is debilitating, and awareness is still sadly very low on it. So would the Leader of the House be willing to work across government to look at how, yes, we in this House, but how the government can work with Crohn's and Colitis UK on their Awareness Week so that we can all play our role in raising awareness of what this condition really is?
Grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the way in which the honourable gentleman has raised this. He's absolutely right to bring this to the floor of the House. It is a really debilitating condition, and it will affect a large number of people across our constituencies. I will join with him in any way that we can to work cross-party in order to highlight that during that week. But also, I think it's at this point I'll offer a meeting with ministers, actually, so that you can speak to them directly, not just about the scale of the problem, but also about what we're doing to tackle it.
Conor Rand.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent Naomi was a victim of extreme online stalking, slander and harassment for several years, which had a profound impact on her mental health. And despite the perpetrator pleading guilty, it took 3 years until they were finally sentenced to prison last month. The ordeal has shattered Naomi's faith in our criminal justice system. So could we have a debate in government time for support for victims of online stalking and harassment?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my honourable friend for raising such an important issue and to say our thoughts are with Naomi and many others who find themselves in this terrible situation. We have introduced measures to tackle stalking. We're currently undertaking a review of stalking legislation to ensure that it is fit for purpose, and our violence against women and girls strategy will also cover online and offline stalking as well. And if my honourable friend seeks a meeting with ministers to look into this further, I'm sure he'll be successful in getting one.
Ellie Chams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK is coming under intense scrutiny at COP30 for saying one thing in public but doing the opposite in private by apparently blocking progress on the Belém action mechanism to secure fossil-free jobs, to secure workers' rights, communities and our planet. And this is despite the Prime Minister, his statement to COP saying, literally, the UK is all in on embracing opportunities. So can we please have an urgent debate on how a shift in the backroom position of the UK could unlock negotiations, rebuild trust and align the government's actions with its public commitments? Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there is absolutely no difference between what the government is committed to and saying publicly to what we are saying in private. Some of these issues, of course, require a great deal of diplomacy. The Prime Minister himself went to COP30 and the Energy Secretary too. And when the Energy Secretary returns, I would expect one of them would make a statement on COP30 and she'll be able to put those points to them directly.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our creative industries offer huge opportunity for economic growth, and the Crownworks Film Studio in Sunderland would be a box office smash for jobs across the North East. Last year, the Chancellor premiered investment to prepare the site, adding government support to that of our Labour Council and elected Mayor. That release was critically acclaimed, but people are crying out for a sequel. So will the Leader of the House confirm that there will be time in the budget debate to discuss growing the creative industries in the North East? And, as a political A-lister, will he help me to ensure that we roll out the red carpet for further investment in Crownworks?
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is right to champion our creative industries. As well he knows, we have a proud record in this country. Many iconic films are filmed here, indeed in our region and indeed in my beautiful constituency. As he alludes to, there will be 4 days of debate on the budget, and that should be ample time for him to raise these thoughts. Thank you.
Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Stockton's Labour Council have made the decision to close 11 play parks, taking away precious facilities from children in Long Newton, Ingerby Barrack and Bishopsgarth. This is despite charging council tax amongst the highest in the country and spending £300,000 on an opening party for their urban park. Yes, £300,000 on a party. Will the Leader grant a debate on the benefits of player parks and the need for councils to spend taxpayers' money with respect?
Deputy Speaker, of course it's important that local authorities spend the money that they have wisely, but for 14 years, of course, they were starved of the resources that they need, and we're determined to put that right. He is a loud voice for his constituency. I'm sure that if he was to seek an adjournment debate, he could amplify it even further.
Natalie Fleet.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Food hygiene rating scheme means that we can celebrate 5-star venues like Aleppi Kitchen in my constituency, and we can all avoid the ones with 1 star if we choose. Councillor David Bennett from Clown is running a campaign to make it mandatory to display these ratings in England just as it is in Wales and Northern Ireland. Will the Leader of the House consider granting a debate in government time to allow us to discuss this?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend raises some important matters, as does indeed her constituent David Bennett. This is the sort of issue I would have thought that applying for a debate, either a Westminster Hold adjournment debate or indeed a backbench business debate, would allow further discussion of that.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The last general election gave us an extremely disproportionate result, with the government getting a massive majority on just a third of the vote. Current opinion polls show us that the next election is due to be even more disproportionate, with the party that's currently leading the polls likely to get a majority on around about 30%, perhaps even less. Given that that's the case, and given that there's huge support among the Labour Party for voting reform, for proportional representation, and the Honourable Member for Clacton himself supports proportional representation, isn't it time that we had a proper consideration in this House of changing the voting system so the next election is not a disaster for democracy?
We've had many discussions, Madam Deputy Speaker, and in fact the opinion was tested on whether or not the country wanted to change on these matters, and they decided that they didn't. The government doesn't have any plans to bring that forward, but that doesn't mean that the debate won't go on.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Leader of the House join me in again congratulating the Scotland men's national football team in qualifying for the 2026 World Cup, an entire team of heroes? However, not least from my West Dunbartonshire constituency, John McGinn, a former pupil of my old school, St Columba's Clydebank. Does the Leader of the House recognise that we've got McGinn, Super John McGinn? He's Stevie Clark's man, he's better than Zidane. Does the Leader of the House agree he is in fact Super John McGinn, and congratulate the entire team?
I do, Madam Deputy Speaker, congratulate the entire team, John McGinn and everyone involved, and I just gently remind him, if my memory serves me correctly, Steve Clark was in fact a Sunderland manager and perhaps honed his skills when he was there. But I just also gently remind anyone that didn't hear it before, last time they qualified, Scotland qualified, was 1998. Last time England won the World Cup was 1966, and the link there, of course, is both times had a Labour government.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy
Speaker, will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Jacques Jeffries, a grandson of my constituent Susan Jeffries, on his selection for Team GB at the Winter Olympics in February, but share my frustration that he has to set up a fundraising page to make it financially possible to go? Madam Deputy Speaker, in the week that Scotland reach the World Cup and England start the Ashes campaign down under, will he recognise the soft power of sport and agree to a debate in government time on how we fund athletes, retain our place on the world stage and help those like Jack fulfil their ambition?
I do wish Jack and all of the athletes all the success in the world, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're very proud of all of them. Of course, sometimes funding is a major issue. The government is trying to put that right because we have great faith in our young people and in particular the importance of sport in their lives. If she wishes to look for a call for debate on these matters, I'm sure there are many others across the country that through their MPs would be able to make similar points.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is National Road Safety Week and soon the Government will unveil its much anticipated road safety strategy. In my constituency of Rosendale and Darwin, road safety is now the issue most often raised with me and our neighbourhood police. Yet when we raise these concerns with reform leadership at Lancashire County Council, they consistently refuse to take action. Their policy is to wait for accidents to take place, stating there needs to be at least 10 collisions, of which 20% must be killed or seriously injured before they act. This flies in the face of common sense as an insult to our residents that see close calls and near misses every day. We must listen to our communities, and I've been calling on the leadership of Lancashire County Council to work with me on this, but so far they refuse to even meet. Road safety should be above local politics, and so would the Leader of the House agree to a debate in government time on this important matter?
Deputy Speaker, I thank the honourable friend for raising this question, which is timely in Road Safety Week, and also thank him for all the work that he does on behalf of his constituents. Lancashire-led reform-led Lancashire Council comes up quite frequently, Madam Deputy Speaker, and as I've said before, but I'll repeat, it does appear that they've over-offered and they are under-delivering. If they won't meet my honourable friend, which I find astonishing actually, because whoever the leadership in the local authority is, they should be meeting with MPs. If they won't meet with it, I'm sure a Transport Minister will.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 12-year-old Holly Goodwin from Margate last week won her category of age champ in the trampolining and tumbling championships in Pamplona in Spain for Great British Gymnastics. Like my honourable friend, her family had to raise money for her to go there because they don't get funding until she's 18. Will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Holly, but also help me to secure a meeting with the Minister to see how we can support young people in sport, especially young girls and women?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do congratulate Holly, and as I said before, everyone else involved in success in sport. So there's two from the same side of the chamber, so that's the beginnings for perhaps a debate. But actually, she raises an interesting point. I think ministers will be available to meet with the honourable ladies so that they can raise these issues with them directly.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Blackpool Council have asked for residents' views for the most ambitious and exciting regeneration project in our town's history. In less than a week, over 2,500 residents have signed my petition calling for Blackpool to build a world-class arena on the empty site on the Blackpool Central area, backed by local industry experts and local artists. A venue like this could hold major concerts, e-sport tournaments and international sporting events and secure Blackpool's legacy as a destination for world-class entertainment. Does the Leader agree with me that a project of this scale could be transformational for my hometown, which is in desperate need of an economic boost to tackle the highest level of deprivation in a place in this country?
He knows I share very much his concern about the state of some coastal towns, but also our ambition to make them better as we go forward. He is a tireless campaigner for Blackpool. There is clearly potential in the scheme that he talks about for economic growth, investment and jobs in his constituency. They are all things that this government wants to see in every part of the country and including in coastal areas like Blackpool. I think this probably falls within the parameters of a contribution to a budget debate, actually, because supporting coastal towns is a very, very important part of what the government is seeking to do.
Babarindi.
Speaker, today is Transgender Day of Remembrance, yet today is also the day where leaked EHRC guidance of single-sex services shockingly indicates that people could be challenged on their sex because of, quote, their appearance, behaviour or concerns by others, and turned away if, quote, there is any doubt that they are telling the truth. This would unacceptably result in trans, non-binary and potentially anyone being questioned because of how they look, and would be unworkable for businesses and service providers. So will the government commit to putting a workable and inclusive proposal before this House so that Liberal Democrats can protect hard-won rights and dignity?
Mr. Speaker, and before I answer the question, may I just wish the honourable gentleman all the very best wishes, having got engaged this week, indeed in this very chamber. The government respects the court judgment. This is a serious matter. There clearly are different views on this, but the government is absolutely committed to bringing forward proposals at the earliest opportunity and giving the House an opportunity to discuss them.
Last week saw a big day for Rochdale and a big day for Greater Manchester as building works began on a world-leading research centre, which is the Sustainable Materials and Manufacturing Centre in Kingsway Business Park, backed by £15 million of this government's money. Does the Leader agree that this proves that the government's industrial strategy can boost the jobs and apprenticeships of the future to help towns like mine that have got a proud manufacturing past and present?
Much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I certainly agree with my honourable friend. This kind of investment speaks to the strength of our industrial strategy, which the whole of government is focused on delivering. He's absolutely right to draw attention to how the strategy is unlocking opportunities for young people in every part of the United Kingdom, and I'm sure he will amplify the success of investment and the new manufacturing centre, what it means for Rochdale and beyond. Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, I am deeply concerned by the continuing persecution of Falun Gong petitioners in China, including some disturbing and well-documented allegations of forced organ harvesting. Will the Leader of the House please urge the Foreign Secretary to outline what concrete actions the government will take to press for an immediate end to the unethical harvesting of organs from religious minorities in China, and to ensure the protection of the Falun Gong against transnational repression in the UK? Thank you so much.
Speaker, can I thank the honourable member for raising such a serious and unreported issue, because as ever he's a real champion for religious minorities, and I commend him for his commitment to that cause. He knows that the government is committed to defending freedom of religion and belief for all. The environment for freedom of religion and belief across China is restrictive and includes persecution of Falun Gong, both in China and overseas. We do continue to monitor the situation and review evidence. And if, as he reports, these matters are true, then it would constitute a serious violation of human rights in our view. I will draw it to the attention of the Foreign Secretary, but he may also have noticed that Foreign Office questions are on the 2nd of December.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we celebrate International Men's Day, can I ask the Leader of the House to join me in thanking the staff and volunteers of Men Matters in Drumchapel, who offer social, financial and emotional support to men. But can he particularly join with me in thanking Ian Sproul, who ran 10 marathons in 10 days to raise funds for the organisation? And would he be so kind as to consider visiting the organisation the next time he's in Scotland?
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this point. It is a serious one, and absolutely join her in thanking everyone involved at Men Matters for their important work and indeed the success of Ian Sproul. I'm sure that she, as the whole House knows, this week is England's first ever men's health strategy. And as for her invitation, should I find myself in Scotland, I'd be delighted to accept.
Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the government's commitment to reform of business rates to boost our high streets. In New Toxteth, we have a situation where one street faces much higher rates than other parts of the high street where other businesses are exempt. This is negatively affecting owners like Joe that runs Fuelled Coffee. Could the Leader of the House find a time for a debate on how we can support community businesses like Fuelled before the new system comes into place?
Deputy Speaker, the Government is absolutely committed to supporting local businesses and local high streets, which is why we are seeking to protect high streets by creating a fairer business rate system. He will know that at the end of this month we will mark Small Business Saturday, giving us the opportunity to further celebrate the small businesses in our communities. Should he seek to raise this matter either through a debate of his own or indeed through the budget, then I'm sure it will be a popular topic.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like my honourable friend, the member for Southend Weston Lee, who's no longer in his place, my inbox is filled to the brim with emails about fireworks. Now, when enjoyed as part of professional displays, as part of national holidays, they can be absolutely magnificent, but my constituents are concerned that they're actually being deployed well outside of normal hours and well outside of holiday times. So on behalf of my constituents, those with PTSD, those with autism, veterans and families with pets that have all contacted me, can I press the Leader of the House for an urgent debate on this issue, on the need to update firework regulations for the modern era?
Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman is right to raise this issue. He's not the first today, and he's certainly not the first over the past few weeks. This is an important matter, particularly at this time of year. It is true that there are rules around the use of fireworks, but as we all know, they're not always kept to. So this would be a popular topic for debate, judging by the number of people who raise it with me.
As I suspect, it's an important question on Scottish football. Richard Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will my right honourable friend not only join me in congratulating the famous and heroic Scottish football team on their qualification for the World Cup this week, but also the charity Fife Gingerbread in my constituency, who this week were also successful as finalists in the Centre for Social Justice UK Charity Awards, recognised for their stargazing strategy and brilliant work to tackle child poverty and promote employability for lone parents. So will he consider allocating time for Parliament to debate how we can best support the vital work of third sector organisations in providing employability programmes?
Mr. Speaker, I certainly join him in congratulating the Scottish football team for the first time since 1998 qualifying for the World Cup, and in case he needs reminding, there was a Labour government then too. I'll absolutely join my honourable friend in congratulating Fife Gingerbread Charity for making it to the Charity Award finals, and I want to thank them and volunteers across, charities and volunteers across the country for the vital work that they do to support families and in tackling child poverty.
And I thank the Leader of the House for his responses this morning. There will be a few moments for the front benches to swap over. Which brings us to a statement, a fairer pathway to settlement. The Home Secretary.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement on a fairer pathway to settlement for migrants. The story of migration in this country is woven through my own. My father came here in the early 70s, my mother a little less than a decade later. Both came to seek a better life, and they found one here. In time, while always proud Kashmiris, they became British citizens themselves, Brummies too, and they brought up 4 children just as proud to be a part of this country and that great city as them. This is not just my story. This is the story of many of my constituents in Birmingham Ladywood, and it is the story of many millions more across this country. I, and so many others like me, are patriots. Mine is a love of a country that is forever changing, while something essential about us always endures. It is a patriotism that finds room for those who trace their roots back many generations and those who, like me, do not. But I worry that this broad patriotism is, for some, narrowing, and that a vision of a greater Britain is giving way to that of a littler England, as anger turns to hate. Some will choose to scorn this analysis. They would rather we simply wished it away. But those who look like me do not have that luxury. Our lives and the lives of our families are more dangerous in a country that turns inwards.
So we have no choice but to ask, what is the cause of our division and how might this country be united? As I said earlier this week, the pace and scale of migration in this country has been destabilising. I spoke on Monday of the 400,000 who have claimed asylum since 2021. But that figure pales in comparison to the net migration figure in the same period. In that time, 2.6 million more people moved to Britain than left. To place that in perspective, around 1 in every 30 people in this country arrived in those 4 years. This is the result of the extraordinary open border experiment conducted by the last Conservative government. In that period, now sometimes called the Boris wave, immigration controls were drastically lifted. This was most notable in the case of the health and care visa, where minimum salary requirements were dropped. An attempt to fill between 6,000 and 40,000 jobs led to the arrival of 616,000 individuals between 2022 and 2024. Over half were not even filling jobs in the sector at all, but were rather dependents of those who were. And abuse, as any Member of Parliament can tell you, was rife. I would think my support for migration need not be stated, but after some of the questions I faced on Monday, I think I had better do so. Migrant communities have, for generations, been woven into the tapestry of British life. While I will never believe in assimilating communities, we have achieved cohesion because different communities have integrated, retaining their distinction within a single pluralistic whole. This makes demands of those already here to remain open to new arrivals, but more than that, it demands something of those arriving. To settle in this country forever is not a right, but a privilege, and it must be earned. Today, that is not the case. Settlement, or indefinite leave to remain, comes almost automatically after 5 years' residence in this country. At that point, a migrant gains access to many of the rights of a British citizen, including to benefits. As a result of the unprecedented levels of migration in recent years, 1.6 million are now forecast to settle between 2026 and 2030, with a peak of 450,000 in 2028. It's around 4 times higher than the recent average. That will now change. As this government announced in its immigration white paper, the starting point for settlement will move from 5 years to 10. To ensure this is earned, new criteria will be added, which will act as a disqualifying bar for those who do not meet them. Firstly, the applicant must have a clean criminal record. Secondly, they must speak English to A-level standard. Thirdly, they must have made sustained national insurance contributions. And finally, they must have no debt in this country. While these criteria set the bar that everyone must meet, there are a series of other tests that have today been published for consultation, and these either add or subtract from the 10-year qualifying period. To recognise the particular value to society they play, the government proposes the following. Those who speak English to a degree-level standard could qualify for a 9-year path to settlement. Those paying the higher rate of tax could qualify at 5 years, while those on the top rate could qualify after 3, the same as those on global talent visas. Those who work in a public service, including doctors, teachers, nurses, would qualify after 5 years, while those who volunteer, subject to this consultation, could qualify at between 5 and 7 years. Not subject to consultation, the partners of British citizens will continue to qualify at 5 years as today. And this is also true of British nationals overseas from Hong Kong, who will qualify at 5 years in honour of our unique responsibilities to them. All grants under the Windrush and EU settlement schemes also remain unchanged. While some will be able to qualify for settlement earlier than 10 years, others will be forced to wait longer. Once again, these are subject to consultation, but the government proposes that those who have received benefits for less than 12 months would not qualify for settlement until 15 years after arrival. For those who have claimed benefits for more than 12 months, that would rise to 20 years. To encourage the use of legal routes into this country, those who arrive illegally could see settlement take up to 30 years. As has already been set out, refugees on core protection will qualify for settlement after 20 years. Although those who move to a work and study visa could earn settlement earlier, and those arriving by a safe and legal route would earn settlement at 10 years. This consultation is open on some cohorts of special interest. This includes settlement rights for children, members of the armed forces, and victims of certain crimes. As well as considering the responsibilities that are expected of those who seek a permanent life in this country, the consultation also raises the question of the rights that will be provided. Specifically, it proposes that benefits might not be available to those who have settled status, reserving them instead for those who have earned British citizenship. Finally, this consultation addresses the question of the so-called Boris wave. Specifically, the cohort of lower qualified workers who entered the country along with their dependents through the health and care visa, some of whom are never expected to be net economic contributors. It is right that we apply more stringent controls for this group, and for that reason we propose they should wait 15 years before they can earn settlement. Crucially, for these and every other group mentioned here, we propose these changes apply to everyone in the country today who has not yet received indefinite leave to remain, though we are seeking views on whether there should be some transitional arrangements available. May I make one thing absolutely clear, though? We will not change the rules for those with settled status today. These are people who have been in our country for years, even decades. They have families here, wives, husbands, children. They have worked in our hospitals, taught in our schools, and have been contributing to our society for years. Fairness is the most fundamental of British values. We made a promise when we gave them settlement, and we do not break our promises. The Reform Party, I note, not present today, have said they will do this most un-British of things. The Tories have said that they will, but then said that they won't, and I am left in as much of a muddle about their policy as they are, that perhaps the Shadow Home Secretary might enlighten the House today. But I can be clear that on this side of the House, we won't change the rules for those with settled status. Madam Deputy Speaker, as this consultation shows, we also listen to the British public, and I encourage all those interested to make their voices heard. Today, I have set out what we propose, and perhaps more importantly, why. I love this country, which opened its arms to my parents around 50 years ago, but I am concerned by the division I see now, fuelled by a pace and scale of change that is placing immense pressure on local communities. For those who believe that migration is part of modern Britain's story and should always continue to be, we must prove that it can still work, that those who come here contribute, play their part, and enrich our national life. While each will always retain something of who they were and where they came from, they become a part of the greatest multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy in the world. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I, as always, thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. Well, she's had a busy week. I wonder if this burst of hyperactivity has anything to do with her leadership bid. But as her shadow, I will say this: I am rooting for her. I am rooting for her in her tussle with the Health Secretary as to who gets to replace the Prime Minister, although I fear my endorsement may not be entirely helpful with her colleagues on her side of the House. Now, let me start by saying this. Immigration under successive governments has been far, far too high. That has included illegal immigration, which since the general election across the Channel has surged, with 10,000 illegal immigrants crossing just in the 75 days the Home Secretary has been in post alone. last year, the first year of a Labour government, there were a record ever number of new asylum claims, and the number of illegal immigrants accommodated in hotels has gone up under this Labour government, even though they promised they would reduce numbers. But of course, besides illegal immigration, on which this government is so clearly failing, legal migration has been far, far too high as well, absorbing the equivalent of half the new housing supply in recent years. Allowing mass low-skilled migration is actually bad for the economy, not least when we have 9.5 million working-age people here out of work. And mass low-skilled migration without integration has placed all kinds of pressures on society, not least because there are 1 million people here who don't speak English at all or properly, or the fact there are 10,000 foreign citizens in prison. Where I suspect we do agree is that limited, very limited, high-skill migration is a good thing, but the days of mass low-skill migration must come to an end. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is much in this statement I support, not least because so much of it is so familiar. The idea of a 10-year route to ILR is something that we proposed in amendments to the government's bill, I think around about 9 months ago. Inexplicably, the Labour Party inexplicably voted against those measures here just a few months ago, and now they've adopted them. We also proposed removing benefits from foreign citizens, including those on ILR who don't have British citizenship, and this consultation document now looks at doing the same thing. So I am delighted, Madam Deputy Speaker, to see that the Shadow Home Secretary, upon arrival at number 2 Marsham Street, has got out the copy and paste function on her laptop and started copying and pasting conservative policies. Now, I do, however, have one or two detailed and specific questions, which I am asking in a spirit of constructiveness, given she has adopted so many conservative policies. Now, she said importantly that these policies on ILR qualification would apply to those people here already. She is absolutely right to say that, and I support it. She mentions transitional arrangements. I would just urge her to be very cautious about that, lest it creates loopholes. But does she have an estimate she can give to the House as to when these new measures will be implemented? Because the rules that she referred to took effect, I think the previous rules around legal migration started in January 2021. So those people arriving on those rules will become, under the present ILR rules, eligible from January 2026, just a few weeks' time. So when will these changes get implemented? I hope as soon as possible. Now, she also mentions that to qualify for ILR at 10 years, you need to have made national insurance contributions. I've tried to get through the consultation document in the last half an hour. I think I'm right in saying that the qualifying threshold is to have earned £12,570 for a period of 3 years. She'll perhaps correct me if I've got that wrong. But that does strike me as a very low level of earnings, and I would urge her to consider setting that level higher. £12,500 for 3 years would not represent a net economic contribution to this country. I think that threshold should be set a great deal higher, and I would urge her to seriously consider that. Now, she also mentions the possibility of volunteering, getting people ILR at 5 years rather than 10. We know how people game the system when it comes to immigration, for example, by pretending to convert to Christianity to get asylum. So I would urge her to just draft those rules very carefully and be extremely cautious about that, lest she creates some loopholes. I would also ask her to consider adopting one last Conservative policy, since she appears so enthusiastic about them, and that is to introduce a binding cap on legal migration, voted for by Parliament each year, so this House can democratically decide what the level of inward migration is. She's adopted so many of her other policies. I strongly urge her to adopt that last one as well.
Home Secretary.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I suppose I should start by saying I'm pleased to see that the Leader of the Opposition let the Shadow Home Secretary have a go today. He seems rather overly concerned about my personal future. May I suggest that he should worry about his own and that of his party? And one good way to secure the potential future of the Conservative Party would maybe start with an open and honest acknowledgement of their track record in government. Dare I say it? Maybe even an apology for messing up the system so badly in the first place. I have to say, given their current track record, they barely have the right to ask questions, let alone propose solutions. Like settlement, it's my view that you have to earn the right to offer solutions, and I would say to him one way of earning that right would be to apologise for what the Tories did first and foremost. He asked a specific question in relation to when these changes will come into effect. It's a 12-week consultation. It will end in the middle of February, and we would anticipate making changes and to begin the phase-out of those changes once adopted from April 2026 of next year. As he knows, the immigration rules usually change twice a year, every year, and that is when we would begin to start making some of those changes. Some potential changes would require technical fixes and solutions that may take a little longer, but the intention is to start from April of next year. He made the point on the qualifying threshold around £12,000. He will note that that's the national insurance contributions threshold that we have used, and that is specifically because that is one of the quickest ways to establish whether somebody is in work or not. So it's designed to give an indication of the period spent in work. He will, of course, know that there are different income thresholds for the different routes by which people can come into the country, and those are not being changed. He made a valid point on ensuring that the new system, as we develop it, mustn't have any loopholes. I will, of course, be very alive to that, and as we discussed at length in the House on Monday, there is a relationship between some types of visa overstaying and, of course, coming straight into the asylum system as well, and I'm very alive to those risks, and we will do everything we can to shut that down. This will be, in the end, a whole package of reforms across both the illegal migration system and dealing with asylum, as well as legal migration, to clamp down on abuse and retain public confidence in running a migration system overall and in the asylum system in particular. And what can I say on the CAP? I mean, the CAP has had a long life in the Conservative Party, and I would just gently say they never managed it in 14 years themselves. I don't think we're going to be pursuing that failure now.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I applaud my right honourable friend on many points, not least debunking the idea that a cap is going to solve anything or is even achievable. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a lot of detail in this, but one of the issues now is that people currently going through the system have to apply repeatedly to extend their discretionary leave to remain until they reach settlement status. This is costly for them, cumbersome for the Home Office, and does nothing to help them integrate or work in the community. I've had the opportunity to meet with her junior minister on this issue. Can she give any assurance to the House that the Home Office is looking at this to ensure that those who are welcome here have a less burdensome system to go through, which will also hopefully save money and enable the Home Office to focus on more urgent issues?
Well, my right honourable friend brings a huge amount of personal experience to this discussion, having been a minister herself and with a very august track record as a select committee chairwoman. So I will always take very seriously any suggestions that she makes, and I will discuss with my ministerial team the detail of some of what she suggests. I think our principled position is it is right that people pay fees for visa extensions. It is right that we move from a 5-year to a 10-year period, a qualifying period for settlement. We're not consulting on whether we move from 5 years to 10 years. That is already decided policy. What is set out in the consultation are some of the other questions that sit underneath that. But I would happily discuss with her, because I know she has big experience in this area, Home Office capacity and how we build a system that can work effectively, not only in terms of being delivered by the state, but providing certainty for the people that ultimately do want to make their lives in this country.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Before I begin, I beg your forgiveness in taking a few extra seconds to reflect on the exchanges in this chamber on Monday. I would like to use the opportunity to put on the record my utter contempt for those who abuse the Home Secretary and anybody else who is abused based on the colour of their skin or their religion. That is not what Britain stands for. The Home Secretary, of course, will choose the language that she wants to use in this debate, and I will choose my language too. The constructive and moderate tone of voice that I and the Liberal Democrats will use in these discussions about immigration will remain, as will our attempts to help offer feedback as and when the government brings forward proposals. The number of Liberal Democrats in the chamber today shows that we are not ignoring this. Indeed, we've got as many in the chamber today as the whole of the Reform Party, and none of them are here. We're aware, as others, of the issues in communities up and down in the country, and for immigrants who live here too. We agree with the Home Secretary that faith must be restored in the immigration and asylum system, as I stated on Monday, and we agree that requires changes to policy. And of course, most of what we're discussing today is distinct from some of the discussions we were having on Monday about desperate refugees and asylum seekers. We also believe that it must be acknowledged that prior to Brexit and the removal of nearly all safe and legal routes, this country had a more rational and controlled approach to immigration and asylum. That party is responsible. We think it is regrettable that the government has not made quicker progress towards building stronger links with Europe in its work on getting control of our immigration policy. And we believe that discussions about regaining control must also come with a proper discussion about the opportunities that provides and the potential risks. Changes to pathways to settlement must be with regard to the economy, to public services and fairness to individuals. We are concerned about the chilling effect some changes could have on the economy. The UK is fast becoming a less competitive place for science and innovation, not least because of Brexit. The cost of a 5-year global talent visa to Britain is £6,000 per person. That is around 20 times more expensive than comparable visas in our competitor countries, where similar schemes typically cost a few £100s. It is no surprise that so few researchers come to Britain on these visas every year. Cancer research alone spends £900,000 annually, money that could be better spent on setting up research labs instead. The government must also be careful about the effect its rhetoric and policy will have on our public services. The NHS is heavily reliant on nurses and staff who are not British nationals. So has the Home Secretary made an assessment of the risks that some will leave, and what steps is this government taking to develop domestic talent in the health and care sector?
Thank you. I thank the Lib Dem spokesperson. I don't propose to revisit the detail of our exchanges on Monday, but what I will say to him is I will always listen to constructive contributions wherever they come from in this House, and I will reflect on the points that the Liberal Democrats will be making in order to be constructive. One thing where we will perhaps continue to disagree is I think it's just important we acknowledge that there is concern across our country. It is not made up, and it does demand answers of politicians. And that is a point of, I hope now, agreement between us. I think he made a point in relation to the asylum system. Forgive me, I didn't pick it up directly, so if I don't address it now, he's welcome to write to me on that point. Again, I don't propose to go into the details that we discussed on Monday on the asylum policy statement, but one of the things that I did make very clear is the number of those arriving on small boats in this country is exactly the same almost as the number that overstay visas. So there is a relationship here in the overall migration system between legal migration and then illegal migration, and that overstaying and then coming straight into the asylum system, and in particular into asylum accommodation at the point at which a visa ends and somebody overstays, is a very real problem with very real significant numbers of people doing that, and that is something that I think it is incumbent on us to resolve, and that is what the totality of all of these reforms are designed to do. He will, of course, know that the government has made huge strides in resetting our relationship with the European Union, and these are matters that we discuss very closely with our counterparts in Europe, and I think that the progress since the EU reset has been considerable, and we will continue to build on that. Once again, though, I don't propose to revisit old debates. We live in a new reality, and we are forging a new path ahead. We will, of course, want to give certainty to people who are already in this country. That is what we are doing with the consultation that we have set, and I have given certainty, for example, to British citizens who wish to bring their dependents over, those who are here from Hong Kong, where our arrangements will not change, Windrush grants, EU settlement grants as well, none of which are affected by the consultation. People have known for a while, since the government published its immigration white paper, that the qualifying period would move from 5 years to 10. He made a point about fairness to individuals. I would just gently say I agree about that, because fairness and certainty to those who've come here to work and make a contribution to our economy is absolutely important. I think what our reforms are designed to do, however, is also to think of fairness to those who are already here and building public confidence in the system overall. He made some points on the National Health Service, and I know that the Secretary of State for Health takes very seriously future labour market reforms and making sure there is a pipeline of the required labour in order to make sure that our NHS keeps going, and we absolutely value the contribution that those from overseas who've come to work here in our National Health Service have made, are making, and will always continue to make.
Dame Nia Griffiths. much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I have a constituent born and bred in Llanelli who is unable to bring in his foreign spouse because of the current earnings limit of £29,000. So the Home Secretary will be very aware that the Government's Family Financial Requirements Review notes that a threshold of around the region of 23,000 to 25,000 would allow most British workers in full-time minimum wage jobs to qualify. So when will she be considering this review and looking again at the fairness of the current earnings thresholds?
What I would say to my honourable friend is we always keep those thresholds under review, and we will continue to do so in relation to family and bringing dependents over.
Sir Edward Lee.
Well, the Home Secretary loves our country, and I love her efforts, frankly, because it's not just the fate of this government that depends on her success, but good community relations and saving dozens of lives at sea, and, let's be frank, probably our political fate also. So will she undertake to be judged not just by the strength of this announcement and words spoken in the House of Commons, but actually results, so that we do actually make a real contribution to stopping these boats? And so will she be prepared to constantly ratchet up the pressure so that if you're sitting in France, you think, is it worth the risk? I've got virtually no chance of being allowed to stay in Britain forever. I will have my case reviewed very regularly, every 2 years. I will be sent back where I came from when it's safe, and otherwise I'll go back to return hub. Can we not all agree on that?
What I would say to the honourable gentleman is results are all that matters. It's incumbent on me to think about the way that we have to reform this system, to make a public argument for it, to win that argument, to persuade people, and then to get this done. What I care about now is making sure that we can deliver these proposals, and we will do so. And then I need to make sure that the Home Office is in a position to make sure that we can really run a system properly, administratively, and also fairly in the future. That is what matters. This is a low-trust environment for the public. We all of us involved in politics know that, and in the end the public have heard a lot of rhetoric from a lot of people, but this government intends to get on and deliver and to win the trust of the British people.
Louis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, and in particular what she said about the more than 75,000 nurses who are working in our NHS who arrived in this country since 2021. Those nurses and other healthcare professionals were actively encouraged to come here to fill the gaps left by the previous government's failure to do NHS workforce planning. And since they arrived, they've served our communities and cared for our citizens with distinctions. So can I welcome what she said about maintaining a 5-year route for those who are engaged in public service? And could she just confirm that that would apply to NHS staff like those that I've mentioned? And could she furthermore say that how she will continue discussions with DHSC colleagues to ensure that there will be no unexpected reduction in NHS workforce staffing in the months ahead?
Yeah, well, my honourable friend is right about the contribution that those nurses and other staff in the National Health Service are making. He will know that we are consulting specifically on the element of the proposals that relates to public service and that getting you a 5-year discount on the qualifying period. No doubt he will make his own responses to that consultation. We have heard those too. But of course, in the normal run of things, public service would include those who work in our critical public services.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I broadly welcome the changes to ILR, but I seek clarification about whether there will be revocation for those already settled who break the law. And why is the government proposing making low-skilled workers who are net fiscal recipients wait for 15 years for ILR instead of telling them to just leave the country? And on the broader question of immigration, the government says it wants to get the numbers down. The Boris wave was a disgrace, that is correct. But of the measures implemented so far by this government, they are projected only to reduce the numbers of people coming here by 61,000 a year. That's before we take into account the new rules for Gaza, for Afghan dependents, and for the schemes launched this week by the Home Secretary. And it's in fact less than the revision by the ONS of the numbers coming last year. So if she does want to get the numbers down, when will the Home Secretary bring forward new policies to make sure that the number of visas issued falls by the hundreds of thousands as soon as possible?
The ability to revoke indefinite leave to remain, those powers are not going to change as a result of this, and he will know that the specific provisions in relation to foreign national offenders are also going to be unaffected. Separately, we are going to review the threshold in relation to criminality because the current rules have worked on the basis that you cannot qualify for indefinite leave to remain if you've received a sentence of 12 months or more, but given the changes that are being brought forward in the sentencing bill and others, we will be looking at all of that threshold in its entirety. He's raised a point around retrospectivity. We will also be reviewing that as we review all of the criminal thresholds that apply here. He said another question in the middle bit, and forgive me, I missed it. Well, if he will write to me, I will come back to him because I think he's asking about wage thresholds. He made a final point, which I did pick up, which was around modelling and essentially the numbers that we're talking about and whether 61,000 a year reduction is the right number. Let me just say to him, look, I will be coming to this House on a regular basis to be held to account for the delivery of these reforms and those that I set out on Monday in relation to the asylum system. It's a big package of reforms taken together. These are the biggest changes to settlements since 40 years, and the asylum package is also, one of the biggest packages of modern times. The combination of the two, I think, is going to keep modellers and others very, very busy over the coming months. But what I will promise the House is we'll be transparent on the data, on the numbers, and what our proposals will mean in practice. That will inevitably change as we design the new system as well. But they will always get transparency from me in this House.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I agree with the Home Secretary that our immigration system needs reform and that people are concerned about it. I think we should also be very clear in this House that we recognise the benefits of immigration to our country, the talents, the jobs, the entrepreneurship it brings in, and that nobody would ever argue that we will bring this country together by tearing families apart. On that basis, then, it is very welcome to hear the Home Secretary commit to a 5-year pathway for partners of British citizens, something that for many of my constituents has been a deeply concerning thing because they wouldn't ever wish the state to tell them who they could fall in love with. But given that some of those people are on different visas here, can she clarify the 5-year term, how that will be calculated, so that we don't inadvertently end up penalising people who fall in love with somebody who came on a worker's visa but has been here for 5 years? Love is love. Let's make sure in this country we welcome it.
None of the rules about marriage in country, as it were, are going to change. But I'd be very happy if she wants to send me some of her constituency examples to have a look at that. I think it's important that we have a distinction between what citizenship unlocks as a set of rights for British citizens compared to those who are working here, who may not have settled status, who may acquire settled status. I think it's right that in the consultation we open a question about what is unlocked in terms of the British state and your rights here at citizenship as well as at settlement. But I'd be very happy to discuss these matters with her in more detail, and I'm sure I will do so over the course of the next few months.
Josh Babarinde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many migrant survivors of domestic abuse apply to settle in the UK permanently if their relationship has broken down because of domestic violence or abuse. And the Right Honourable Lady knows just how close this issue is to my heart. So will she reassure this House and survivors of domestic abuse that they will be protected under her reforms and that her changes to ILR will not have the adverse and maybe unintended impact of locking those survivors into abusive relationships?
Well, firstly, let me put on my record congratulations to the Honourable Gentleman for his engagement. Let me also say, he is an assiduous campaigner based on his own experiences in relation to domestic abuse, and he and I have had many debates across this chamber on those matters before, and I respect very much the perspective he brings and the way in which he constructively engages with the debate. I can give him that assurance. We will continue to have pathways to settlement for victims of domestic violence and other vulnerable groups as well. And what we're seeking to do in the consultation is to invite views and perspectives about how some of the changes might have perhaps unintended consequences and how we can ensure that those pathways continue to exist in the future. And I'm sure he will be engaging with the consultation in that regard.
Alison Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I agree with the Home Secretary that fairness must be at the heart of the immigration system, but can I ask her to say a little bit more about the route to settlement for the Ukrainian families who generous constituents of mine have opened up their doors to following the horrific invasion of their country?
Well, friend, nothing we've said today changes the position of those who've come to this country on the Ukrainian scheme. That is a bespoke scheme for the people who've arrived here from Ukraine. It's in fact not seen as a refugee route, it's seen as a temporary scheme, but all of those provisions that are in that were supported by us in opposition. They continue to be supported by us in government, and nothing in relation to the position of Ukrainians in this country is going to change as a result of anything in the asylum policy statement or the command paper today.
Sir Julian Lewis.
As the descendant of immigrant grandparents, I have a high degree of empathy with the Home Secretary's opening remarks about her own family. Would she agree with me that the reason that both main parties are facing the possibility of an electoral bloodbath is not so much about the overall levels of immigration, but about that fraction of it, which is still a very large number of people who come to this country on small boats and by other illegal means. We do not know what they believe, we do not know what values they have, and in many cases, because they destroy their documents, we do not even know who they are. Can she explain how the measures she's outlined today will have an impact on deterring that sort of person from breaking into our country?
Well, let me say to the honourable gentleman, I've acknowledged the way, that the way the system is working or not working, being more the appropriate way to describe it, is causing deep unease across the country, including in my constituency, including of those people who are of immigrant backgrounds themselves. And it is that sense of unfairness. A lot of people in my constituency regularly report to me what they see as abuse of visas, overstaying as a particular problem. Others are more concerned about small boats. I acknowledge that those concerns are legitimate and real and felt deeply across the country. That's why I think it's so important that we rebuild public trust in the overall system, both dealing with illegal migration and legal migration as well, based on the principles of fairness and contribution, and give public confidence that the rules that we have can be maintained, can be enforced, and that they will be followed properly. He's right that things like the destruction of documents and other ways in which people seek to frustrate our ability to remove them from this country is driving some of the discontent. That is why the reforms that I've set out in the asylum policy statement are designed to say to those making the calculus in the north of France, don't get on a boat, it's not worth it, that is not the way to come to this country. And it is why, as we build safe and legal routes into this country, which will be a clearly much more privileged way of entering this country with a faster path to settlement, as I've said today, at 10 years, it will show people making that calculus very clearly which path is worth it and which one is not.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the assurance that the Home Secretary has given to those who have achieved indefinite leave to remain and have settled status in this country. That certainty is really important. She will know that in my own constituency, I have many families who are from Syria, many families who are from Afghanistan. They came on the Syrian programme and under Operation Pitting, and they have limited leave to remain. But they are deeply worried, from what the Home Secretary said, as to whether they will ultimately be deported from this country. Can she give assurance to those who are currently seeking ILR, who came on those programmes, that they will be able to follow the path that was set out for them when they arrived? Would she give that assurance and make sure that this country will never do a deal with the Taliban to deport back from this country women and children?
Well, we will always have specific obligations in relation to not returning anybody who's arrived and being arrived in this country seeking asylum or has been granted refugee status. We would not return those individuals to danger. We will abide by our international obligations, and I hope I did make that clear in the debate on Monday. The ability of us, though, to have new rules that look more carefully and more regularly at whether a country is safe for citizens to be returned to, I think is important, and it is a shift in the way that we do things, but we will never return people to face danger, and I'll be happy to look at some of the examples that he has raised today in more detail with him.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I first of all want to apologise to the Home Secretary for missing part of her statement, but I have read it. Can she confirm whether any assessment has been carried out on the economic impact on Scotland of extending the ILR wait time to 10 years and beyond? And if not, why not? So whatever, Madam Deputy Speaker, the needs of Wales and Northern Ireland, Scotland's economic and workforce needs have once again appeared to have been ignored. Does the Home Secretary understand that such a blanket policy risks exacerbating skills shortages, threatening vital sectors and making it harder for communities to thrive? And incredibly, for a so-called Labour government, this lurch to the right now appears to favour the wealthy over the less wealthy.
Secretary.
Really, Madam Deputy Speaker, he will know that immigration is a reserved matter. That will not change. The thing that's holding back the labour market in Scotland is skills and education policy, which is devolved, and it's on the SNP to sort that out.
Natalie Fleet.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In 2024, in the run-up to the election, I knocked on door after door where they told me that they were absolutely sick of our broken immigration system that we had inherited from the Tories, and they did not trust reform, who aren't here today to tackle. I welcome the intervention from our Home Secretary. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that in order to be the open, tolerant and generous country that we know that we are, we must get order and control at our borders?
Secretary.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. This is an open, tolerant and generous country. And what I have acknowledged in the reforms I've set out both today and on Monday is that there is a condition to unlocking the full extent of that openness, that tolerance and that generosity. And it is about having order and control at our borders, a fair, managed asylum and immigration system where the principles of fairness and contribution are at the heart of it. That is the way that we can prove to the public it is possible not just to have an asylum system at all, but one that they can also be proud of.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Thank you. I'm not sure it helps the Home Secretary's cause me to have a great deal of respect for her, and I thought her interventions this week particularly pointed towards members of her own party on the left, that actually they are going to make the cause they choose to champion more difficult if they don't get this system under control as a whole was very important. Actually, those people that support asylum and refugee processes and want them to be there in the future need the system to be brought under control. But my sincere question relates to what I would describe as the tinkering around the edges of the human rights laws. The Home Secretary must know that whatever she does to clarify the fringes of the rulings that the ECHR has made over the years and created a case law that forces our judges to rule in the favour of spurious claims can't change that. That those rulings are those rulings, unless we are willing to, at the very least, derogate from some elements of the court's decisions. How does the Home Secretary really think that we can override those well-established rulings that give enormous amounts of rights to people when they're making their asylum claims?
Yeah, that's right. That's enough of it.
Well, look, I think he and I have an obvious point of difference on the European Convention on Human Rights. This government will not be leaving that European Convention. We don't see the case for derogation or any other measures. We do believe it is possible to achieve the reforms that we need by legislating for the way in which Article 8 applies to immigration cases, by defining family life and more tightly drawing up what is known as the public interest test. We will debate that legislation in this House in a great deal of detail, but I hope to show to everyone who is currently a sceptic of our ability to stay in the ECHR and get control of our migration system that it is possible to do both of those things, to abide by convention rights, the Human Rights Act, which has brought those rights into our domestic legislation. It's a very important piece of international, it's an important international treaty, and we don't see any reason to leave it or derogate from it. But I do hope that members opposite will engage in good faith on the changes that we seek to make to Article 8 and the immigration rules in particular, because we think that that is one of the best changes we can make to get control of our migration system.
Members will notice that we have got two debates after this business. So if I could ask remaining members, I'm going to finish this statement in around 10 minutes, so if I could ask remaining members to please keep their questions and then the Minister keep the answers short. Orinder Just.
Deputy Speaker, excuse me, as I am someone who was not born in this country, does the Home Secretary agree that we should not stop talking about the benefits of immigration whilst managing migration, and as she has already acknowledged that we will always offer sanctuary to those truly fleeing peril, does she also accept that for those people we should be making settlement and integration into British society quicker and easier and not more difficult?
Well, firstly, I hope he will reflect on how I opened my statement today and how I closed it. I see the benefits of migration. I wouldn't be here if this country hadn't welcomed my parents. It is literally the story of my life and how I have managed to get from there to this dispatch box today. So I very much feel those benefits personally, and I will always speak up for them, as I have done today, as I did on Monday, and as I will always do as I make the case for the need for these reforms out there in the country. I hope he and others will always support me on that. I know they will. I've also made clear that we will always offer sanctuary. I want us to be a country that offers sanctuary to those who are in need. That is why it is so crucial that we get order and control back into our asylum system and open up new safe and legal routes. And it is important that today I have confirmed that those safe and legal routes will have the earlier 10-year path to settlement. That is what will enable the integration we all want to see.
Slade.
Deputy Speaker, in the summer I spent the morning with Anushka, a senior social care worker for Altogether Care in Wimborne. She and her colleagues earn more than the earnings threshold and came here on the understanding with their families that they could make a new life here, contributing to society, paying their taxes. And the recent hostile narrative is making her and others consider leaving for places like New Zealand and Australia. So can the Home Secretary confirm whether Anushka and her colleagues doing jobs that cannot be filled by British workers who won't do the work will be considered public sector workers?
Good question.
Well, these will be matters for the consultation. I would encourage her to engage with that. We have specifically put in an element around public service because we recognise the specific contributions made by those who fill the gaps in our labour market that we are not able to do otherwise. What I would say to her on the general principle is settlement is not a right. It is, I think, absolutely fair for a government to say that it's something that has to be earned. It is not unusual for countries to change their settlement requirements. That's quite normal, happens all over the world, as British citizens who work abroad know all too well as well. And the proposal for going from 5 years to 10 years will not change, but all of the other measures that I've said today are subject to consultation. I would encourage her to engage with that.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Home Secretary's statement today, the care and the fairness with which she has crafted these proposals and the incentives that they imbibe too. Because from my work on the International Development Committee, I've seen the immense negative impact of global displacement and the lost over $20 billion of economic activity every year from developing countries. And then, of course, there's the impact, too, of asylum accommodation on our overseas assistance budget. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that these measures might, whilst they might ostensibly seem harsh, there is nothing progressive that well-meaning people on the left of politics should be excusing in a situation where thousands of people are risking their lives across the English Channel from already safe countries?
I think it's immoral if we stand by and watch people make dangerous crossings, pay thousands of pounds to criminals and put their lives and those of others at risk, and we stand back and do nothing. I think that would just be a total dereliction of duty. I also think it would be a dereliction of duty for a Labour government to continue to preside over a broken system or not have the mettle to get ahead and reform that and watch us lose public consent for having an asylum system at all. I think it's existential for us having public consent for that asylum system, and that is why all of these changes are so necessary.
Yeah. And with a very short question, Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And can I thank the Home Secretary for a confirmation about the 5-year pathway for Hong Kongers. That is a promise kept to them. The statement today was otherwise a series of push measures, and I'm always fascinated by how when you come down to the individual decisions to make within the system, how much more difficult it gets. So if I could push her on the Boris wave, which she has criticised, the vast majority of those figures were made up by Hong Kongers arriving here under the B&O scheme, Ukrainian refugees and student deferred visas after the COVID pandemic. So which of those measures does she think was a mistake?
Well, look, I was very clear about our responsibilities towards Hong Kongers, that the issues in relation to the Ukraine scheme are not going to change, but he will also know the stats in relation to health and care visa holders, primarily those who came to work in adult social care work. They will be the main contributors to the settlement increase between 2027 and 2029, because they will be making up nearly half of all settlement grants in 2028. So, look, I think the figures here really do speak for themselves. It is important that the government moves to deal with such a vast number that is happening over the next few years. I think it is right that we therefore extend the path to settlement and ask some questions about how we manage the situation in the future.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Home Secretary, and I entirely agree that we need control of our borders in this country. In respect of transitional arrangements, over the next 12 years there will be an 83% increase in the over 80s in my constituency. Health and care visa workers are currently providing critical services to many of my constituents and supporting the NHS as well. Please can she confirm how the transitional arrangements will ensure that that care continues to be provided to my constituents?
Well, look, the Health Secretary and his department are, of course, always reviewing and considering the arrangements we need to make sure that we have a workforce capable of sustaining the National Health Service. We do have an ageing population that brings its own specific challenges as well. What we are talking about here today is not preventing people from being able to work in our National Health Service. It's about the pathway to settlement. It's about extending from 5 years to 10 and then thinking about the rules that we need that might bring that number down from 10 and closer to the 5, or that might increase it instead. And I would encourage her in that spirit to engage with the detail, and I'd be happy to talk to her offline as well.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary announced a consultation on a 5-year pathway to settlement for those that work in the public sector to recognise the particular value they play in society. Please will she put this to the vote of MPs to ensure that we can ensure that those that work in organisations fundamental to the public sector, like those that work in hospices, including the amazing hospice in my constituency, Woking and Sandbear, are always included in the 5-year pathway?
All of these measures will be taken through in the usual way.
And with the final question, Mark Seward.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm absolutely delighted to hear the Home Secretary announce that we will keep our promise to British national overseas visa holders from Hong Kong. It's something I've been working with my constituents on over the last few months to lobby the government on, and I'm delighted the government has listened. Now, as well as transnational repression, they bring other issues to me too. Many Hong Kongers in Leeds South Western Morley are highly skilled, they have excellent qualifications, but the employers in this country don't necessarily recognise them, which makes it that much harder to get the first job. So will the Home Secretary work with other departments across government to help employers in this country recognise the amazing contribution that Hong Kongers can make to the UK economy?
Well, he makes a very important point. It's not the direct responsibility of the Home Office, but I will ensure that those conversations are happening across government, and I will make sure a minister from DBT writes to him on this matter.
And that concludes the statement. I'll give a few moments for the front benches to swap over. come to the Select Committee statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. Andy Slaughter will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions are taken. At the conclusion of his statement, I will call members to ask questions on the subject of the statement. These should be brief questions, not full speeches. Can I emphasise that questions should be directed to the Select Committee Chair and not the relevant Government Minister? Front-benchers may take part in questioning. I call Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Backbench Business Committee for allocating time for me to make a statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. This is the 7th report of the Committee on Rehabilitation in Prisons. This time last year, the Justice Committee began its principal inquiry to look at the crisis of reoffending against the backdrop of a broken criminal justice system. Around 80% of all offending is reoffending. This figure alone suggests there is a serious issue that HMPPS is not currently serving its stated mission of rehabilitating the people in its care. The purposes of prison are clear. They include punishing, protecting the public, and rehabilitating offenders. The opportunity for offenders to be rehabilitated in prison should not be considered a luxury. It is a fundamental necessity to ensure that those who have done their time can return to society as law-abiding citizens. Yet the evidence we receive paints a starkly different prospect. Instead of being places of reform, too many of our prisons have become places of stagnation, where offenders languish and rehabilitation opportunities are scarce. Our inquiry into rehabilitation has taken place amidst a prison capacity crisis. Overcrowding, staffing shortages and deteriorating infrastructure have created conditions that is actively undermining rehabilitation. The committee found that the current conditions across the prison estate are simply not conducive to reform. Overcrowding has led to arbitrary prison transfers, disrupted sentence progression and reduced access to purposeful activity, education and family contact. With the demand for prison places set to keep increasing, the government must set out the steps it will take to ensure that rehabilitation is not compromised, alongside how it intends to manage demand and supply. The challenges do not end there. In the 12 months to the 30th of June 2025, there was a leaving rate of almost 12% among prison officers. These staffing shortages are not just an operational inconvenience, they are a public safety risk. As we heard recently, in the year to March of this year, 262 prisoners have been released in error. Overworked staff, outdated systems and inadequate training has meant that when officers are stretched to breaking point, the likelihood of administrative errors rockets. Current levels of wrongful release are not isolated blunders, they are symptomatic of a system under intolerable strain. Alongside this, high turnover, poor recruitment processes and limited professional development have all contributed to a culture that hinders rehabilitation. Governors lack the autonomy to lead effectively, and the current staffing model is unsustainable. The committee recommends that prison staff should receive training at least annually, with more frequent support as they progress through their career. Furthermore, the prison estate is in a state of disrepair. Dilapidated buildings and broken infrastructure limit access to rehabilitative spaces and contribute to poor mental health. Despite recent capital investment, it remains unclear how the government intends to address the £1.8 billion maintenance backlog. This backlog is not just a financial figure, it represents real barriers to rehabilitation. We call on the government to provide clear breakdown of how funding will be used to address this backlog and to ensure that future investment is targeted at improving prison conditions and rehabilitative activities. The committee is deeply concerned by the widespread failure to meet the statutory minimum for time out of cell. Many prisoners are locked up for 22 hours or more each day, with limited access to fresh air, showers or rehabilitation. This lack of time out of cell undermines efforts to reduce reoffending and contributes to poor mental health and disengagement. Purposeful activity, including education, work and offending behaviour programmes, is central to rehabilitation, yet it is inconsistently delivered and often deprioritised. The sentencing bill rightly aims to incentivise good behaviour and engagement in purposeful activity through its earned progression model. But this ambition will fail if purposeful activity remains inaccessible. The committee calls for a renewed focus on ensuring all prisoners have access to meaningful activity, and for time out of cell to be formalised, standardised, and data on it to be published going forward. Education is the cornerstone of rehabilitation, yet prison education is underfunded and poorly delivered. Participation rates are low. 50% of prisoners are not in education or work. For those that do take part, Ofsted ratings remain poor, with 75% of prisons inspected in 2024-25 rated inadequate or showing no improvement. It is therefore unsurprising that 2/3 of offenders are not in education or work 6 months after release from prison. Given this, we are alarmed by reports of significant real-term cuts to prison education budgets of up to 50%. We expect the government to clarify the rationale of any budget reduction. Conditions across the youth estate are also in decline. Children in custody are entitled to 15 hours of education per week, yet the committee heard that this minimum is routinely not met, and children are spending up to 23 hours a day in cell due to the failure of HMPPS to manage behaviour effectively. As well as making every effort to meet the statutory minimum of 15 hours for education, HMPPS must set a statutory minimum for time out of cell in young offenders' institutions. Health and wellbeing services are failing to meet the needs of prisoners. Mental health support is inconsistent, and operational pressures prevent timely access to care. Women in prison face acute and complex health needs, yet the system is failing to provide even basic support. Although the government has set out its ambition to reduce the number of women in custody, it is unclear what action will be taken for those currently in prison. The committee expects the government to respond with a clear plan for how it will meet the health and well-being needs of the women currently in its care. Remand prisoners now make up 20% of the prison population, the highest level in at least 50 years. Yet they remain excluded from much of the prison regime, including access to education. We heard that remand prisoners often spend extended periods in custody, only to be released directly from court following conviction without any support or intervention. This raises serious concerns about how the government expects these individuals to avoid reoffending. Rehabilitation must be available the moment someone enters custody, and therefore remand prisoners should have access to all parts of the regime should they choose to participate. There is plenty more to be done to improve outcomes for offenders. The committee will shortly commence part 2 of its inquiry by examining how rehabilitation continues in the community for those released from prison, as well as those serving non-custodial sentences. A further report will follow, making not only recommendations for changes in how community sentences work, but also long-term recommendations for structural reform across the criminal justice system to once and for all end the cycle of reoffending. But let me be clear, the time for action cannot wait. The sentencing bill represents a welcome opportunity to rethink how we reduce reoffending, but legislation alone will not deliver rehabilitation. I apologise that it's a bleak prospect that I've set out, but that is the reality of prison life, and prisons are simply not working, and particularly not working in the field of rehabilitation. As this report sets out, it must be matched by a renewed focus by HMPPS to deliver better time out of cell, education and health and well-being services. I urge the government to take these recommendations seriously, to promote rehabilitation effectively, and to ensure that our prisons are places of reform, not despair. The government has inherited a very difficult situation here. It is trying to address that in a number of ways, but the crisis in prison cannot be underestimated, as the symptoms have shown recently in wrongful releases and other tragedies in the prison sentence. We have to deliver a system that truly serves the public good, and that will only come in the longer term with effective rehabilitation in prisons.
Testimonies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for presenting the committee's statement. With the Chief Inspector of Prisons recently concluding that the outcomes for children in custody are not improving, and the urgent notification issued to Oak Hill Secure Training Centre, And given that it's children we are discussing, does the honourable member agree that the conditions across the youth estate are completely unacceptable? And as recommended, the government should produce an action plan for youth custody?
I do agree, and I thank the honourable member who's a very effective and active member of the committee for that question. We shouldn't ignore the fact that youth custody is one of the successes of the prison system, in the sense that over the past few decades, the numbers of young people in custody have gone down from, I think, over 3,000 to around 400 now. But those who remain in youth custody in a rather confused variety of institutions are not being well served. I think it's the intention of the committee to look at youth custody and young people in prison itself, but we can only examine and recommend. I think it is for the government to look, as a matter of urgency, at the crisis that exists also in the youth estate for those who remain in custody.
I thank my honourable friend for his statement. Does he agree that reducing reoffending through rehabilitation is not only the key to reducing the prison overcrowding, but also the court backlogs too? And it is unacceptable that prisoners have to very often make the choice between either engaging in work or education, or accessing their basic needs, such as having time out in fresh air, having a shower or a hot meal.
Again, I thank my honourable friend for that question. It's certainly true that there is a close relationship between the crisis in the courts and the crisis in prisons, and a good example of that is that, well, as I mentioned in my statement, the number of people on remand is at a 50-year high, and they are occupying prison places for far longer than they should be. It's also true that if we can break the cycle of reoffending, and I've said that 80% of offences are reoffending, then numbers in prisons will come down. That in itself will make rehabilitation in prisons a lot easier. That will mean that fewer people are becoming before the court. We're in a downward spiral at the moment. We have to not only stop that, we have to reduce that, so that lower offending, lower offences against the public at large mean fewer people in prison and fewer people before the courts. It's a big ask, but if we don't start, we won't get there.
Sir Julian Lewis.
In light of the urgent question we had earlier today, does the chairman of the committee believe that it is essential for the purpose of rehabilitation that prisoners should be protected against indoctrination by convicted terrorists?
I do believe that very much so, and I believe that is what this and indeed previous governments have set out to try and achieve. I hope that the report of Jonathan Hall KC will shine a light on what is not working in relation to that, and certainly given his background, I believe that it will. The government then has to implement that, because one of the problems with prisons, and we covered this in another very recent report on drug culture in prison, is the operation not just of extremists, but organised crime and the lack of control, the lack of organisation and disciplines, not only in the prisons he talks about, but across the prison estate, is one of the most worrying aspects of prison life at the moment.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is an epidemic of violence against women and girls in this country, and the government has a stated aim of reducing this by 50%. In that context, it is absolutely critical that our prisons play their role in rehabilitation. Does the chair of the Select Committee agree with me that while 70% of people are being released from remand, having spent either directly because they're found not guilty, or in fact because they're found guilty but on the basis of time served, we're currently missing a huge opportunity to do rehabilitative work, because that is typically not offered to those on remand at all?
Again, I'm friend very much for that question. Numbers of women in prison, and indeed of young people, are a small percentage of the prison population, but they give particular cause for concern. I mentioned in my statement the health and mental health needs of women in prisons, which are higher, levels of self-harm are higher, and there is a clear need there. It's a need, I think, to be fair to the government has recognised, which the government has policies to address. It's the practicality of that we're lacking now, because at the moment the levels of support that are required. So I welcome the fact the government has said it wants to see, very clearly it wants to see fewer women in prison. What we need to know is how is that going to be achieved from this point onwards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Around half of prisoners are neurodivergent, and the population of young prisoners with ADHD is around 10 times higher than in the population at large. And with such specialist targeted support needed for these prisoners, we've heard that they've been let down by the system and they can't access the right time at the right support regardless of the new system that's in place. Does the Honourable Member agree that the delay in producing an update to the Neurodiversity Action Plan is unacceptable and it really must be published straight away?
Lady, as the newest member of the committee, I'm pleased to see her here today. Yes, she's always got behind the brief very quickly because we are waiting for an update on the Neurodiversity Action Plan. Many levels of societal problem are reflected to a much higher level in prisons, whether that be people with learning difficulties, people with literacy problems, and indeed neurodivergency. That's not a coincidence, but it is a wake-up call to the fact that these issues have to be addressed. If we are, rehabilitation is for all prisoners, and special steps need to be taken in relation, particularly neurodiverse prisoners. So I hope we are going to see. I need to see the Minister, very capable Minister in her place, is listening to all this, and I'm sure she will tell us very soon when the action plan is going to be updated.
And that concludes the statement. We now move on to the presentation of bills. Presentation of Bill, Bobby Dean.
Tax Relief Evaluation Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 14th of January.
Friday the 14th of January. Presentation of Bill, Max